Chapter 363. Han Biyu-chu heaved a deep sigh. This matter isn't just a joke. It's a big joke that involves 2 Bayan clans and 2 billion people. It was just that this joke hinted at too much of a fishy situation. Han Biyu-chu sighed. Then, he put Diwu Qingru's words together. He was horrified to find that Diwu Qingru hadn't gone out of his own free will. In fact, he had been forced out by King of Hell Chu. King of Hell Chu didn't want to force Diwu Qingru. But, Diwu Qingru should be proud of his impressive achievements. King of Hell Chu has always been scheming. But, he has pushed the 2 Bayan clans to a dead end. Since this battle was started by him, how can he not pay a price? Diwu Qingru smiled. Han Biyu-chu vaguely understood. Sir, are you talking about the matter of chasing King of Hell Chu for thousands of miles? Yes. Diwu Qingru nodded approvingly. King of Hell Chu has been hit by my destroying soul and breaking heart palm. But, he's still able to escape thousands of miles in one day. This is a very frightening situation. I feel that he's likely to escape this time. Therefore, I didn't relax my pursuit of King of Hell Chu. But, I was also preparing for the eventuality that King of Hell Chu could escape. That's why I immediately gave the order for the reinforcements to change their direction. At the very least, they have to deviate from their original route by 800 miles. On the surface, it seems that their ultimate goal is to go to the main battlefield. But, I only need to give the order if there's a change in the situation. And, those 3 armies can immediately attack the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Of course, there's a precondition for this. And, that is, the general of the heaven-splitting mountain pass must come out to fight. Diwu Qingru slowly said. Therefore, I arranged for 500,000 Bayan soldiers to go. Han Biyu-chu sucked in a cold breath. I didn't intend to let Bai Changtian and his 500,000 Bayan soldiers go back. It is the same here and on the main battlefield. Diwu Qingru didn't conceal his thoughts in front of Han Biyu-chu. He said in a heavy voice, but, these 500,000 demonic beasts aren't enough. They aren't enough to make the heaven-splitting mountain pass break. If you want to achieve this goal, you have to establish a prerequisite, King of Hell Chu's importance in Tai Biyu-tian's heart. The weight of King of Hell Chu in Tai Biyu-tian's heart. Han Biyu-chu's heart shook. Today, Diwu Qingru had said this sentence twice. Moreover, he had not changed a single word. Why was this so? Rumor has it that Tai Butian has already gone on an expedition, and is currently in the middle of the month. Diwu Qingru said indifferently. Han Biyu-chu really wanted to ask, so what? But he didn't dare to ask. For Tai Butian to lead the army on an expedition, the boost to the morale of the soldiers is incomparable. But there was also one great disadvantage: Tai Butian was in a very dangerous place. Moreover, it would be obvious that her heart would be the most vulnerable to my attack. Therefore, Tai Butian's safety had become Tai Longcheng's biggest headache and worry. Tai Longcheng wanted to ensure Tai Butian's safety under such circumstances. Moreover, the morale of the army couldn't be slack. So, the best thing to do was to send Tai Butian to another front line, and that was the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Tai Butian would be absolutely safe there. With the heaven-splitting mountain pass there, my army wouldn't be able to break through the pass even if it were 10 million soldiers. So, I wouldn't be able to catch Tai Butian. Diwu Qingru spoke with a strong sense of self-confidence. Yes, Han Biyu-chu agreed. Therefore, I concluded that Tai Butian, the Iron Cloud Monarch, is already in the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Diwu Qingru narrowed his eyes, and a sharp cold light flashed in them. Diwu Qingru had only miscalculated one thing: Tai Butian hadn't gone to the heaven-splitting mountain pass because Tai Longcheng had sent him there. However, such initiative and passivity had no effect on Diwu Qingru's Ji-rong. All roads lead to the same destination. Han Biyu-chu would have had to knock his head against the wall if he still hadn't understood by now. He smiled and said, King of Hell Chu is important enough in Tai Butian's heart. Then, Tai Butian would have come to his rescue as long as he knew that King of Hell Chu had escaped to the vicinity of the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Yes, Diwu Qingru nodded. But, Tai Butian can't act on impulse. He must have a good reason to come to King of Hell Chu's rescue. Han Biu-chu said. Therefore, the Prime Minister had sent by Chong Tien to deliver Tai Butian. And that was to give Tai Butian a good reason to come to King of Hell Chu. Moreover, Tai Butian would have advanced again after this great victory. But no one would have said anything about him since he had such a glorious victory. Moreover, our army isn't in the vicinity. Yes, Diwu Qingru smiled. Therefore, the Prime Minister had sent a letter to King-level expert Jing to burn down the mountain if necessary. In fact, it wasn't just to burn down King of Hell Chu. It was also to inform Tai Biu-tien that the Golden Horse Riders Department's pursuit of King of Hell Chu has arrived here. Tai Biu-tien continued. Yes. Tai Butian would have led the others to help him in order to save King of Hell Chu. But King of Hell Chu is still in Iron Cloud at the moment. So, Tai Butian can't make a move before the situation is settled. Therefore, he has no choice but to come himself. Han Biu-chu was so shocked that he opened his mouth wide. So, the Prime Minister's plan is here. Tai Butian would have come to rescue King of Hell Chu. And our three teams could have changed their direction at any time. They could have attacked him head-on. Or, they could have cut off Tai Butian's escape route. Or, they could have pursued him from behind. And they could have seized the heaven-splitting mountain pass in one fell swoop. And King-level leader Jing and the others would have been there at that time. And they would have gathered all their experts to chase King of Hell Chu. Perhaps they would have been able to kill Tai Butian in one fell swoop. In that case, the situation would have been settled in one day. Han Biu-chu was really shocked. Diwu Qingru had actually laid such a big trap. Yes, that's why I've ordered the three teams to get close to that place. They must be within 1,500 kilometers. Tai Butian would have been alerted if they got close. But they wouldn't have been able to catch up if they got too far, Diwu Qingru said. However, 1,500 li is still quite far. It would have taken 3 days for the teams to travel on foot. Wouldn't it be too far? Han Biu-chu asked worriedly. Not far. Jing Menghun would have tried his best to stop King of Hell Chu. And Tai Butian would have had to wait or look for King of Hell Chu's whereabouts. This entire process would have taken at least one night. And, once such a situation occurs, only the cavalry would have been able to move for the entire night. The army would have followed closely behind. The elite cavalry would have been able to cover 800 kilometers in one night. Tai Butian's side would have been able to find the person or the body. Then, they would have had to retreat. And this would have taken time. The army wouldn't have been able to catch up with them. So, it would have been impossible for everyone to rush back at once. 4 to 6 hours wouldn't have been enough. Jing Menghun's experts would have been able to delay Tai Butian's army by 6 hours if they hadn't been able to kill Tai Butian. And that would have been more than enough. And our cavalry would have been able to get within 300 kilometers during this time. What we're fighting for is the time within these 300 kilometers. Diwu Qingru tapped his finger on the table, and the generals of these three teams are the Gold, Silver, and Jade Tiger generals. I've specially selected these people. Han Biu-chu immediately understood. Gold Tiger General Jin Nankai, Silver Tiger General Long Ao, and Jade Tiger General Yu Chenglong, these three people were relatively young. The oldest one wasn't more than 40 years old. And they were all cavalry experts. They were especially good at leading the enemy into battle. They dared to take risk. These three people were the kind of people who would have risked their lives to seize such an opportunity. Diwu Qingru had specially selected these three people to lead these three teams. And this was because he had seen their drive. Diwu Qingru would have never used these experienced and prudent generals in this kind of operation. After all, this was a blitzkrieg. And this opportunity might have been lost in the blink of an eye. And which of these experienced and prudent generals didn't plan before making a move? But if you plan before making a move, then you won't be able to catch up with the real opportunity. It was absolutely necessary to be impulsive. An ordinary general wouldn't have been able to get within 300 kilometers. And they wouldn't have been able to fight for time. But These 3 people would have been willing to risk their lives to seize this opportunity. Diwu Qingru had thought this through thoroughly. It was just an assumption and a conjecture. But he had taken every conceivable possibility into account. And he had decided on a brilliant plan for Iron Cloud. If they didn't seize this opportunity, then Iron Cloud might really lose this war. Another piece of invisible information flew over while they were talking. Diwu Qingru took a look at it. Then, he smiled and handed it over to Han Biyu-chu. Han Biyu-chu took a look at it. Then, he couldn't help but smack his forehead. What a brilliant plan. Sure enough. The information said, after the Iron Cloud army invaded my 500,000 soldiers, they advanced 100 kilometers along the slanting valley. They're currently outside the slanting valley. They're close to the mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect. Diwu Qingru chuckled and said, the key lies in the words slanting valley. The terrain here is narrow and difficult to traverse. The soldiers must be in good order to pass through. Once they're chased or attacked, they'll be squeezed together. It'll be difficult for them to move even an inch. The enemy doesn't even need to expend much effort to break the morale of the entire team. Diwu Qingru's brows twitched. He said sinisterly, Tai Biyu Tian, I sent 500,000 soldiers into the slanting valley for you to defeat. You should be satisfied, right? However, I, Diwu Qingru, am not so easy to take advantage of. Even if I purposely sent them out to be attacked by your army, it's still the same. You defeated my army head-on. Then, I'll chase after you and kill you, the leader of Iron Cloud. The sky had already darkened. Tai Biyu Tian was taking a nap in the commander's tent. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside. Someone shouted, "Fire! Fire!" Then, a soldier came to reporting to the emperor. The entire mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect suddenly burst into flames. The mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect burst into flames. Tai Putian's heart skipped a beat as he sat up straight. His eyes shone with a dazzling light. Yes. Earlier, only the main peak was on fire. Thick smoke rose everywhere. But, with the wind, the entire mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect has turned into a sea of fire. Moreover, the fire is spreading to the surroundings. The scout replied respectfully, I understand. Tai Biyu Tian felt his heart beating wildly. All the fluids in his body rushed to his head. He even felt a little dizzy. Why did Beyond the Heavens sect suddenly burst into flames? There was no doubt that someone had set it on fire, but why? Tai Biyu Tian's body even trembled slightly. Chu Yang had returned. This fire must have been set by the Golden Horse Riders department. They had chased after Chu Yang until here. They had lost track of Chu Yang. But they weren't willing to let Chu Yang escape. So, they set the mountain on fire. They wanted to burn Chu Yang inside. Even if they couldn't burn Chu Yang, they could still drag him out. No one could survive in a burning mountain. Chapter 364. I'm here. Wu Kuangyun jumped out with a puff while covering his buttocks. The last time he was beaten, he still felt a dull pain. He was lying in ambush at His Majesty's side to prevent the Emperor from coming up with a new battle plan. Organize the troops and set off immediately. Let's go to the place where the fire is burning the mountain. Tai Biyu Tian made a prompt decision and hastily ordered. This won't do, Your Majesty. Wu Kuangyun was startled. Then, he shouted as if his buttocks were on fire, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. He followed closely behind Tai Biyu Tian. His buttocks were sticking out. He was so anxious that his hairy face was dripping with sweat. Your Majesty, please reconsider. Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please wait. Your Majesty, you can't do this. What? Tai Biyu Tian angrily turned around and glared at him. Your Majesty, it's already very difficult to stay here. The slanting valley is too narrow. In case the enemy attacks, we won't be able to retreat in time even if we are 300 miles away. If we go to Beyond the Heavens sect, we will have to go another 400 miles. Your Majesty, if the enemy attacks us from behind, it will be a matter of life and death. Wu Kuangyun remembered that his mouth was already foaming. How could Tai Biyu Tian not know that his decision was too rash? But he thought that Chu Yang had already trekked for thousands of miles, fought hundreds of battles, and was being blocked 400 miles away. His heart was in sharp pain. He wished he could grow wings and fly over there. There must be Great Zhao's army there. There must be a lot of experts there. If he didn't have enough people on his side, he wouldn't have a chance. He thought that Chu Yang would be burned alive if he didn't go and meet him. His arduous escape of 13,000 miles would be in vain. Tai Bu Tian felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. It seemed that nothing was more important than Chu Yang at this moment. If Chu Yang didn't exist in this world, what would be the use of having the 4 seas? Tai Bu Tian's heart was in pain. I don't want the country. I don't want the common people. I only want you to come back safely. No need to say more. The nearest army is 1,000 miles away. It will take 2 days and 2 nights on a fast horse. We will go and take a look. Then, we will come back immediately. Nothing will happen. Tai Bu Tian urged, General Wu, let's go. Take. Who are we supposed to meet? Wu Quangyun asked in a daze. In any case, we're here to provide support. Tai Butian said furiously, do you dare to disobey orders? I wouldn't dare even if you beheaded me. Wu Quangyun was on the verge of tears. His tears really did fall out. His whole body was sweating profusely. Your Majesty is responsible for the country. You mustn't risk your life so easily. Are you going or not? Tai Butian shouted angrily. Your Majesty, please wait here. This general will lead the troops. Wu Quangyun clenched his teeth, stuck out his chest, and said in a heroic manner. You are going. Do you know who we're supposed to meet? Tai Butian cast a sidelong glance at him. Wu Quangyun wanted to say, won't I know if you tell me? But he didn't dare to say it. Quickly pass down the order. Your Majesty, please kill me. Wu Quangyun solemnly said. You think I don't dare to kill you? Tai Butian was anxious. He kicked out and shouted, Men, pass on my imperial edict. Wu Quangyun disobeyed the imperial decree, and conspired to rebel. Arrest him. After he returns to the capital, his entire family will be executed. His entire family will be exterminated, all his wives and concubines will be sent away to serve as. Don't. Your Majesty, don't even think about my wife. Wu Quangyun was so scared that his hair stood on end. He had been lying motionless on the ground like a dead dog. But now, he jumped up, and repeatedly waved his hands. He clenched his teeth and stamped his feet. I'll go, okay. I'll go, okay, imperial edict, this is no joke. The emperor's words are like gold and jade. I won't be able to cry if they are taken seriously. Still not going. Tai Butian's face was cold. This guy's wife is really his favorite. He doesn't care about the others when he says that he will confiscate his family's property. He only cares about his wife. Yes. Wu Quangyun got up, and quickly ran out. Then, he heard the voice of a commanding officer. If you want to go, then hurry up. The sooner, the better. Wu Yi. You stay here. I'll leave 200,000 troops for you. The most important thing is to guard the gate, and guard the camp. Wu Quangyun shouted at a tall general with a square face and big ears. This was his deputy general. His name was Wu Yi. The two of them had cooperated for more than 10 years. Wu Quangyun was very confident in his work. Wu Yi had a big frame and a big head. But, he didn't have any meat on his body. He was as thin as a chicken, and his tongue would run out in a gust of wind. He hadn't finished speaking when Wu Yi grabbed his sleeve. You, what, are you going to do? This place is very important. Wu Yi turned out to be a stutterer. His face turned red, and white foam started to come out of his mouth. In a moment of desperation, he spat a lot of saliva on Wu Quangyun's face. Fuck. Wu Quangyun wiped his face. I have something to do. Wu Quangyun. Wu Yi shouted and looked at him sternly. He pointed his finger at his nose and said, Bullshit. If something happened to you, fuck, you stupid stutterer. Let go of that hand. Wu Kuangyun slapped his hand aside. He was burning with impatience. He had heard Wu Yi stuttering non-stop. So, he had become anxious, and had started to stutter as well. However, Wu Yi didn't let go of his hand no matter what he said. His face turned red, and his lips couldn't stop trembling. He kept shaking his head. It was obvious that he wanted to say something. But, the more anxious he got, the more he stuttered. And, the more he stuttered, the more anxious he became. So, he couldn't say a word. Supreme Commander, the troops and horses are ready, a messenger reported. Taiji Tian had already finished his preparations on the other side. He shouted loudly, Wu Kuangyun, what are you doing? Wu Kuangyun still hadn't managed to break free. Wu Yi was still holding on to him, and wouldn't let him go no matter what he said. Wu Kuangyun's struggle was futile. Wu Kuangyun suddenly knelt down with a plop sound. Uncle, please let me go. My pitiful beautiful wife is about to be banished into the army. Wu Yi was stunned. He subconsciously reached out and scratched his head. What? What? He tilted his head and opened his mouth, rolling his eyes anxiously. Otaku. Otaku? Wu Kuangyun suddenly felt relaxed. He suddenly broke free from his other hand. Then, he rushed out like a whirlwind. He jumped onto his horse, and clamped his legs. Then, the horse flew out. He cursed loudly, you're just a windbreaker for your wife. The messenger at the side shouted, the marshal has given the order, charge, 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 charge his wife. Thousands of soldiers and horses roared together, charge, 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 charge his wife. Their morale was immediately boosted. Wu Kuangyun's face was suddenly filled with tears. Wu Yi, who was at the back, was so angry that he rolled his eyes. He tilted his neck and opened and closed his mouth. More and more white foam came out of his mouth, but he could not say a word. He opened and closed his mouth for a long time like a gill fish that had come ashore. Finally, he cursed angrily, go, your wives. He spat out a mouthful of saliva. But, the army had already gone far. Wu Yi muttered and cursed. Then, he suddenly sang loudly, Wu Kuangyun, you son of a bitch. You deserve to be hacked to death. I'll kill you if you imitate me again. I'll kill you. As the saying goes, a slob can dance, and a stutterer can sing. These words were true. Wu Yi didn't stutter when he started singing. He would sing and curse Wu Kuangyun every time he couldn't win a debate. And, this time was no exception. The army rumbled as it moved forward. Taiji Tian spurred his horse and rushed to the front. I hope we can make it in time. Chu Yang, you must hold on. I'm coming to pick you up. 1,500 miles away, in 3 different directions, 3 armies that were marching in parallel to each other blew their horns almost at the same time, giving out the same order. All cavalrymen, gather immediately. Our target is the mountain range of beyond the heavens sec. Go as fast as you can, even if you die of exhaustion on the road, you must arrive within a day and a half. Tens of thousands of armored cavalrymen rushed out of their formation as soon as they heard this order. And, a big flag was fluttering in the front. The commander-in-chief had already led his personal troops to shoot forward like sharp arrows. Quick! Catch up! Continuous whistling sounds and urging sounds were heard. The 3 huge streams of iron rolled up crazy smoke and dust on the ground. They rushed into the dark curtain of the night like angry dragons. Rear army, keep up with them as fast as you can. Hundreds of thousands of troops from each direction changed their direction with a crashing sound. They followed the hoofprints, and ran as if their lives depended on it. Chu Yang was in that cave. He was deep underground. But, he suddenly felt that the entire earth was slightly trembling. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. Could it be a big army is coming? He couldn't care about anything else, and immediately drilled out. Only when they came out did they realize that it was already night time. A choking smell assaulted their nostrils. The moment they came out, they almost fainted from the choking smell. Looking around, they saw that the entire forest was on fire as far as their eyes could see. He was in a sea of fire. He faintly heard someone shouting, "Withdraw! Withdraw to the passage. Iron Cloud has already arrived to pick us up. We only need to guard the passage. We won't let King of Hell Chu pass. Then, everything will be settled." It was Jing Menghun's voice. This voice was very far away. Chu Yang frowned. This is clearly meant for me to hear. They must be plotting something. But, it's not a plot anymore. It's an open plot. They must have set up an ambush for my team. Chu Yang was aware of the enemy's plot. But, he still felt anxious. How many people in the entire Iron Cloud are worthy of such an arrangement? It must be an important person in Iron Cloud. Who could it be? Neo Qianqian? Impossible. Tai Longcheng? It's possible. Wu Kuangyun? It's also possible. But, it doesn't matter who it is. Iron Cloud can't afford to lose these people. I can't afford to lose them for my sake. Anyway, I've been saving my strength. I'll rush out. Chu Yang instantly made up his mind. Chapter 365. Chu Yang's clothes were as black as ink. He fiercely rushed out of the blazing fire. The whistling sound of the wind made the flames around his body crackle. In this sea of flames, he was like a mad dragon that was overturning the seas and rivers. Wherever he went, the flames would roll outwards. The flames seemed to have a mind of their own as they didn't even dare to get close to him. Jing Menghun would have been shocked if he had seen this scene. Chu Yang's current cold energy was too overbearing. The 7-yin cold energy nourished by the mysterious ice jade ointment was completely absorbed by Chu Yang. Moreover, the mysterious ice jade ointment was also swallowed by Chu Yang. This kind of extreme cold could even freeze a stone to pieces, let alone this little flame beside him. Chu Yang jumped all the way towards the place where Jing Menghun's voice had come from. The flames were almost blazing white. They were making hissing sounds. There was a strange movement in front of him. The smoke was strange. The smoke from the burning flames was black or yellow. However, the smoke in front of him was blue. Moreover, it was very light. Chu Yang raised his eyebrows and sneered. He didn't hesitate to pass through. He passed through with a whoosh. Bursts of corrosive smoke attacked him. Chu Yang didn't hold his breath. He swaggered and flew out. The corrosive smoke went into his nostrils. It was useless. Chu Yang was no longer afraid of the corrosive smoke. The smoke entered his body and became a tonic for the sword point of the Calamity Sword. Chu Yang rushed down the main peak in an instant. He rushed into the sea of fire and into the purple bamboo garden. He went all the way north from the purple bamboo garden. He jumped over 3 valleys like a sea of fire. He jumped like a meteor on the only way to Iron Cloud. There were mountains on both sides of the road. The flames soared to the sky. There was a dense forest. The sound of crackling could be heard. There was a canyon ahead. It was the most dangerous place. Moreover, the terrain was dangerous. There was no other way to pass through it except by force. Jing Menghun must be waiting for him there. He didn't know if he would face 1,000 people this time. 2,000, 3,000, or more. However, Chu Yang's eyes were as cold as ice. He didn't waver in the slightest. He tried his best to regulate his breathing. The Calamity Sword moved back and forth on his arm. The biting cold killing intent was waiting for the moment to explode. The closer he got, the calmer he became. In his mind, dozens of scenes of being besieged by enemies appeared. In every scene, he chose a path of escape. Even if there are tens of millions of people, I will still charge through. Jing Menghun was in a terrible fix. With Diwu Qingru's permission to set fire to the mountain, he didn't have any psychological pressure. He followed the wind, and lit the fire again and again. Soon, the mountain forest that stretched for 2,500 miles was burned into a candle head in the blue sky. King of Hell Chu, let's see how you'll hide this time. Jing Menghun had arrived at a safe place. He was waiting for King of Hell Chu to come knocking on his door. He was feeling very proud of himself. Looking at his right arm that was missing half of his arm, an indescribable anger rose up in his heart. there are cliffs on both sides. King of Hell Chu, you'll have to step over my body if you want to cross. As long as you have the ability. However, the fire had been burning for half the night. It was almost dawn. But King of Hell Chu still hadn't made the slightest move. Instead, the fire was spreading, and was gradually sweeping towards the ambush area. Jing Meng Hun led 3,000 experts to force the fire back with great difficulty. Then, they invisibly advanced several thousand feet. Naturally, the effect of advancing several thousand feet or retreating several thousand feet was the same as long as they were guarding this place. Therefore, Jing Meng Hun didn't care. However, something unexpected happened when he didn't care. The mountain forest at the side was extremely steep, and even the sky was burning red. Suddenly, an extremely mournful and shrill cry was heard, followed by a rumbling sound. Suddenly, dozens and hundreds of house-sized fireballs, mixed with scattered flames, smashed down from the cliff with earth-shattering might. Then, a bang sound was heard from the middle of the cliff. Countless pieces of rock fell down like a meteor shower, and smashed towards Jing Meng Hun and the others. This must be King of Hell Chu's movement. Everyone, be careful. Don't let him escape. Retreat for the time being, Jing Meng Hun shouted. Everyone flew back. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The falling stones pushed up a small hill in front of the crowd. Jing Meng Hun heaved a sigh of relief. Luckily, the cliff hasn't collapsed. It has only collapsed from the belly. The same situation hasn't happened elsewhere. It's a natural stronghold. King of Hell Chu doesn't have the ability to fly over it, but why did the belly of the cliff suddenly collapse? Isn't this too unreasonable? However, Jing Meng Hun turned pale with fright when he heard screams. What's going on? Then, an incomparably fishy smell suddenly spread with the wind. Jing Meng Hun smelled this smell, and suddenly felt dizzy. Then, he felt a faint burning sensation in his lower abdomen. Jing Meng Hun opened his eyes to look. He was scared out of his wits. His scalp went numb, and his back was covered in cold sweat. My mother, what's going on? He saw that 4 or 5 experts of the Golden Horse Riders department were floating in the air not far from him. But they hadn't jumped up. There were 2 huge monsters in front of them. They were as thick as half a house, and nearly 300 feet long giant snakes. These 2 giant snakes had a shining horn on their heads. Their watermelon-sized eyes were flickering with a faint fluorescence under the illumination of the flames in the dark night. One of the snakes stretched out its body. Its blood-red forked tongue was more than 10 feet long. Its mouth issued a strange hissing sound. The other snake's entire body was rolled up into 4 fried dough twists. Each of these fried dough twists had a human body that was screaming and struggling. It was sending the highest one into its mouth. The 4 people who had been rolled up screamed loudly. They struggled with all their might, but they couldn't move. They used their swords and hands to stab the big snake's body. But they only created sparks from the collision of metal. They couldn't even cut the snake's skin. Everyone who saw this cried out in alarm. Where did these 2 monsters come from? Everyone stared blankly. They trembled from head to toe as they looked at these 2 monsters. Their complexions were deathly pale. No one dared to move as they watched their companions being swallowed into the belly of the big snake. The giant snake had already started to devour the second person. It rolled the person up and threw him into its mouth. It didn't care if the person was still holding a sharp sword. It just threw the person into its mouth. With a gulp, everyone could only see a slight rise and fall from its neck. Then, the rise and fall continued downwards until it reached its abdomen. It was no longer that obvious. Then, the third, and the fourth. Everyone stared blankly. They were scared out of their wits. These people were experts of Jianghu. But, when had they ever seen such a terrifying phenomenon? When had they ever seen such a terrifying monster? Was this a fucking snake? Pay attention. This is a spirit beast. Jing Meng Hun regretted his actions. He had seen that these 2 strange snakes were the result of his burning of the mountain. It seemed that their home was in the precipitous cliff. So, they usually wouldn't come out. However, they would need more space in the cave as their bodies grew bigger. His fire had not only burned countless birds and beasts to death, It had also made these two huge guys extremely uncomfortable in their cave. Their cave had been exposed to the wind from 8 sides. Now, the smoke had risen from the bottom to the top. And a large part of it had drilled into the snake's cave. How could these two snakes endure this? They had been living like princes for many years. How did they suddenly catch fire? The cave was full of smoke, almost choking the two snake ancestors to death. Moreover, even the mountain wall was getting hotter and hotter, and slowly, the snake skin was burning. If they didn't go out, they would be burned alive into snake meat, and the kind that would be burnt to a crisp. The two huge snakes rushed out in desperation. They didn't dare to rush out from the side of the fire. They would have rushed into the raging fire if they had done so. Therefore, they could only rush out from the side of the cliff. They rushed out, and fell down with a loud rumble. Their scales were extremely sturdy. But, they still felt dizzy from the fall. After all, the cliff was too high. They had fallen down from a height of several thousand feet. So, they should be proud that they hadn't turned into a pile of mud. One of the snakes unconsciously coiled around 4 people. This was a very nutritious food. Therefore, it didn't loosen its grip even though it was temporarily dizzy. It calmed down a little, and began to gorge itself. Jing Meng Hun was about to cry. How can this be? Spirit beast. What's the level of this spirit beast? Someone asked with apprehension. It's too big. Look at its appetite. I wonder if it can finish half of us after eating all 3,000 of us. Who cares if it's half full or not? Anyway, we can't let it eat us. Another person held a steel saber in his right hand. It's the lowest level. Jing Meng Hun slowly retreated step by step. His complexion was calm. But, he couldn't wait to turn around and run away. Even if I go to the upper 3 heavens and the upper 3 heavens, I won't be able to see such a terrifying beast so easily. How can I encounter such an existence at the top of the food chain in the lower 3 heavens? However, he didn't know that the upper 3 heavens and the lower 3 heavens were in a state of chaos. So, such a thing had become a common occurrence. Everyone was startled and scared. But then, they saw that the snake that was more than 100 feet tall had already fallen down. The other snake that was lying on the ground shook its head vigorously, and raised its head. 4 gloomy and cold eyes looked at Jing Meng Hun and the others. They didn't conceal their desire to devour them. Chapter 366. One of the snakes suddenly arched its body, and jumped forward. It flung its head, and its tongue flew out of its mouth with a shua sound. It flew 100 or 15 feet, and stuck to a martial great master's body with a pa sound. It coiled around his body, and shook its head again. That martial great master screamed in fear. His feet left the ground, and he flew away like a cloud. He fell into the snake's body. The other snake also jumped up and flung its head. But, it had obviously chosen the wrong target. This snake had come for Jing Meng Hun. Jing Meng Hun roared loudly. He jumped up, and held a shining sword in his hand. He exhausted his entire body's strength, and fiercely chopped down. With a swoosh, smelly bird black blood with some green color splattered everywhere. A section of that long snake's tongue was actually chopped off by his sword. The severed tongue fell to the ground and actually twisted and rolled around like a living thing. In the blink of an eye, it was covered in dust. That snake had suffered a heavy blow. It issued a hiss sound from its mouth, and its huge body rolled on the ground in pain. The other snake hissed strangely. It opened its big mouth, and sprayed a pink smoke into the snake's mouth. Slowly, the bleeding stopped, and the snake stopped writhing. Although it was a little sluggish, it had obviously recovered a lot. This isn't a snake. It's an ancient spirit beast, lust dragon. Jing Meng Hun saw the pink smoke, saw the strange healing method, and looked at the silver horns on the snake's head. He finally understood what these two monsters were. He suddenly covered his nose, and retreated at lightning speed. He then shouted, "Quickly retreat. Don't smell that pink smoke." Everyone didn't dare to be negligent. They retreated at full speed for thousands of feet. King-level expert, "What's a lust dragon?" a command horse rider asked. A lust dragon isn't a thing. It's a strange creature. Jing Menghun's spirit was shaken. It could be seen that he felt relieved after knowing that this creature was a lust dragon. This lust dragon looks scary. But it's not difficult to deal with. That's because it doesn't possess any offensive power. It doesn't have any other means of attack apart from the common engulfment and entanglement. Moreover, its speed isn't very fast. But its defense is frightening. Its scales are harder than iron. Take note that their weakness is a white spot the size of a bowl below their head and above their neck. As long as that area was damaged, he would die without a doubt. Also, under the horn on its head, there is a similar white spot, which is also a fatal spot. Most snakes have a weak point at 7 inches. However, this kind of lust dragon has 2 vital points. Jing Menghun quickly said, "Everyone, be careful. We'll be rich if we kill these 2 lust dragons." After the lust dragon died, its skin would rot and become worthless. What was valuable was its blood, its poison sac, a spring sac, an inner core, and a crystal core. The eyes of the lust dragon were rare pearls, and its blood could be used as medicine. It can be said that every part of his body is a treasure. The more Jing Menghun spoke, the brighter his eyes became. It seemed as if this pair of lust dragons had already become his. Then, that pink smoke, what's going on? One of them asked. This lust dragon is the most obscene creature in the world. That pink smoke is secreted from the spring sac inside its body. It has a strong aphrodisiac effect. Even a poison-resistant body wouldn't be able to resist this aphrodisiac. Jing Menghun warned, "Everyone, you must be careful. If you don't find a woman to engage in sexual intercourse with within 10 hours, your body will fester, and you'll die. Moreover, there's no other way to cure it apart from sexual intercourse. Brothers, it's difficult to find a village girl in this desolate place. So, don't suck it into your stomach." Everyone sucked in a breath of air. This thing was so overbearing. In fact, its blood can also be used to make an aphrodisiac. It can also be used to treat this man's unspeakable pain. Impotence. It's effective in one mouthful. Jing Menghun didn't want to speak so clearly, but the eyes of several people lit up as soon as he spoke about this matter. Their faces also turned red. He suddenly realized that these dear friends were afraid that there was something that a man couldn't talk about. Moreover, even if there's nothing wrong with it, it'll become more powerful after taking this blood. It'll at least double in strength. Think about it. How much blood do these 2 big snakes have? Jing Menghun sighed. Everyone's eyes lit up. Who didn't want to be more powerful? Its inner core, spring sac, crystal nucleus, poison sac. Jing Menghun said, "In fact, all of them can be used to make this. But the effects are different. Cough cough, even its pearl-like eyes will turn into a super-concentrated aphrodisiac after being soaked in the wine for 2 hours." Everyone's expression became strange. It seemed that these 2 snakes, no, lust dragons, were all aphrodisiacs. They were like 2 aphrodisiac storehouses. Apart from that, they had no other use. No other use. That's the biggest use. Jing Menghun angrily said, "This kind of thing is more important for a man than increasing his martial power. It can be said that as long as you have one, you'll become a hot commodity in the upper 3 heavens even if you don't have the strength to truss up a chicken. Think about it, brothers. There are so many people in the lower heavens continent. On average, there's 1 in 100 people like this. It's like a moving gold mine." As he spoke, he looked at the group of people around him with gratitude and revealed a smile that no one knew the meaning of. For example, among our 3,000 people, there are 70 to 80 people like this. Suddenly, many people looked at their companions with mocking expressions on their faces. The meaning in their eyes was very obvious. Well, it was very profound. It was as if they were inquiring. Suddenly, many people's faces turned red. They angrily cursed in their hearts. You can't casually say this even if you're a king-level expert. How could such a fucking thing be done so casually? Brothers, you must know that these 2 lust dragons will also leave if we leave. But, King of Hell Chu will also pass by. Then, all our efforts will go down the drain. So, it's better to make a fortune first. Then, We'll wait for King of Hell Chu to make a big contribution. Wouldn't that be great? Jing Meng Hun waved his hand and said, "It's settled. Get ready to slaughter these lust dragons." Wa. The two lust dragons rushed over with hissing sounds. These two guys obviously hadn't eaten their fill yet. They had easily swallowed 5 people. They felt that these strange creatures in front of them were easy to deal with. One of them had lost half of its tongue, but that was only a minor injury. It would recover in a few days. Therefore, the two lust dragons rushed over in an imposing manner. Who would have thought that these strange creatures, which had been like a flock of sheep in front of them, would encounter such a crazy and intensive attack? It seemed as if they had eaten an aphrodisiac. They were attacking their bodies. Moreover, they were jumping up and down. They were using all kinds of tricks one after another. The lust dragons could be considered agile. But they were still far inferior to these people. One of the lust dragons finally received a fatal blow after it had swallowed 7 or 8 people with great difficulty. Jing Meng Hun used a long sword to spin it. The sword carried the king's vital energy and sent it into the white spot on its lower jaw. The king's vital energy suddenly exploded in the vital part of the lust dragon's body. Blood gushed out like a fountain. The lust dragon issued a loud hissing sound. Its entire body stood erect in pain. It was more than 100 feet tall. Then, it fell down with a bang. It rolled over with a loud rumbling sound. Some of the burning trees were uprooted wherever it went. The mountain rocks were sent flying in all directions. It could be said that the rocks were piercing through the clouds. The other lust dragon didn't care about eating people anymore. It only cared about guarding its vital parts. It was already badly battered. However, its 2 vital parts were already dripping with blood as it guarded against the incoming attacks. Suddenly, the dying lust dragon turned around. It opened its big mouth and started to roll backwards at lightning speed. The other lust dragon hissed loudly while covering the rear. Then, it followed closely behind. It's running away, the wind is tight. Retreat. Jing Meng Hun and the others had killed one of them with great difficulty. How could they give up when they saw that the fruits of their labor were about to fall into their hands? They rushed forward to catch up with the lust dragon. They didn't relax at all. The lust dragon issued an angry hissing sound. It turned its head and spurted out a large mass of dense pink fog. Jing Meng Hun and the experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department held their breaths. They hastily dodged behind. "You're running anyway." Jing Meng Hun was full of confidence in the speed of these 2 lust dragons. "These 2 lust dragons are mine today. They can't run away." The lust dragons continued to turn their heads and fled with whooshing sounds. A mountain forest was burning fiercely in front of them. The trees were burning with strange crackling sounds. The whistling sound of the wind and the whistling sound of the flames completely covered the sound of the fight. The 2 lust dragons didn't hesitate to drill into the raging flames. They were afraid of fire. However, they wouldn't die immediately if they drilled into the flames. They would be fine as long as they could pass through the flames quickly. However, they felt that the strange creatures outside were much more terrifying than this fire. The 2 lust dragons went into the fire. Minister Chu's black robe flew high up in the air. He forced the flames away and passed through them like a lightning bolt. Then, he came face to face with the 2 lust dragons who were fleeing in distress. Their eyes met. The 4 eyes of the 2 lust dragons were as big as watermelons. They stared blankly at the strange creature that had suddenly rushed out of the sea of flames. Their brains were almost petrified. They would have exclaimed in surprise if they could speak, "Fuck. Why isn't this strange creature afraid of fire?" Obviously, the creature that came from inside was the same as the ones outside. Moreover, this one seemed to be more powerful. Chapter 367. This pink mist is very dense. It has almost condensed into a solid substance. The lust dragon was so anxious that it spouted half of its spring sac. Too despicable. Too shameless. A group of people is intercepting us from the front. And there's someone who isn't afraid of death waiting here. Do you think that the lust dragons are your prey? Chu Yang hadn't met any enemies along the way. He knew that the situation was extremely urgent. So, he had been very anxious all the way. So, he had flown through the cluster of raging flames. But, he hadn't expected that he would run into two big snakes as soon as he got out of the sea of fire. How can there be snakes in a place of fire? Minister Chu's brain short-circuited. He opened his eyes wide, and didn't understand what was going on. Then, the enraged lust dragon opened its mouth, and spouted a mouthful of pink gas. The two sides were very close to each other. Minister Chu was startled. He hastily held his breath. However, his body was already shrouded in the pink smoke. This is an unexpected disaster. Chu Yang might have been able to take advantage of the chaos and kill his way out if he had arrived a little earlier. The two lust dragons would have attracted most of the enemy's attention if Chu Yang had arrived a little later. Then, it would have been very easy for him to escape. However, he was neither too late nor too early. He had appeared in the path of the two lust dragons at this critical juncture. The two lust dragons regarded him as their mortal enemy. So, they spouted a mouthful of poisonous gas at him. That aphrodisiac, it hadn't been inhaled directly. But, the pink smoke had shrouded Chu Yang's entire body. It was no different from swallowing it. In fact, it was even more serious. It was because the lust dragon had used almost half of its spring sac in this puff of pink smoke. In fact, it wasn't stingy at all. It had used the entirety of its spring sac on Minister Chu. Fuck. What's this thing? Chu Yang angrily shouted in his heart. He waved his hand, and his sleeves fluttered. Then, he dispersed the remaining pink smoke. Then, the lust dragon ferociously pounced on Chu Yang. It opened its big mouth, and ferociously tried to swallow Chu Yang. Chu Yang was extremely angry. Fuck. Did Jing Meng Hun raise this thing? It knew that it was waiting here to intercept me. It didn't know how to avoid the fire. It's too damn loyal. Anger rose from his heart. The calamity sword appeared in his hand with a clang, and he mercilessly slashed down. How could ordinary swords and sabers compare to the might of such an earth-shattering divine item? How could it be described as resolute and decisive, cutting through iron like it was mud? What's more, Minister Chu's anger, his 7 shades, and his elemental energy. Chu Yang's sword chopped off the lower jaw of the lust dragon with a swoosh sound. Blood spurted out of the lust dragon's mouth and half of its neck. Chu Yang's body was once again covered with blood. The sword light flashed again. Minister Chu didn't hesitate. Instead, he chopped off the other lust dragon's chin with a shua sound. This wasn't a fatal blow, but a direct and fatal one. Jing Meng Hun and the others had also contributed greatly in this matter. In fact, Jing Meng Hun and his nearly 3,000 experts had already beaten these two lust dragons to the point of exhaustion. One of the vital parts of the lust dragon was broken, while the other two were bleeding. The defensive power of the lust dragon had been greatly reduced by over half. Moreover, the unparalleled might of the calamity sword had been unparalleled since the ancient times. The two lust dragons started to roll over violently. They seemed to be on the verge of death. This wasn't an attack on their vital parts. Instead, it had chopped off their vital parts. How could they not die? They would have died even if they had 2 lives. However, the sword spirit in Chu Yang's mind screamed and rushed out. What did you provoke this time? Why are they so overbearing? Overbearing? Chu Yang didn't feel anything unusual. So, he couldn't help but ask. Fuck, lust dragons. These are treasures. The sword spirit's voice was somewhat excited. However, it was also somewhat helpless as it said, hurry up and take these 2 guys in. Chu Yang complied. The 2 lust dragons were still rolling over. However, they had lost their lives. Chu Yang's mind moved, and the 2 lust dragons disappeared from their places. Only the raging flames were left in the surroundings. You can go about your business. Outside of the fire, it's your business, the sword spirit said and disappeared without a trace. Chu Yang smiled mischievously. He felt that his blood had started to burn. But, he didn't care. He brandished his sword, and the 7 shades cold energy gushed out of his body like a surging tide. The fire was stifled. Then, Chu Yang's figure shot out like a meteor. This battle couldn't be avoided. But Chu Yang didn't intend to avoid it. He had already made preparations for it. His sword flashed as he rushed out of the sea of fire. He then saw Jing Menghun and the others rushing over with big strides. Chu Yang laughed out loud. "Jing Menghun, you haven't died yet? Come, let me send you on your way." The sword light flashed and emitted 10,000 cold lights. Chu Yang's gloomy voice resounded. It seemed to have the tone of hell. One cold light, 10,000 fathoms piercing light. Jing Menghun and the others were truly depressed. They had seen that such a rare treasure was about to fall into their hands. So, they had followed suit for fear of losing it. Even if there was a sea of fire in front of them, they had rushed forward without any hesitation. But who would have thought that everything would change in the blink of an eye? The lust dragons' bodies were still outside the fire. So, they weren't in a hurry. But who would have thought that they would disappear into the raging flames with a whooshing sound? Fuck me. Could it be that the eastern side of the fire has melted? Otherwise, how could it disappear so thoroughly? How could Jing Menghun be willing to let such a rare and miraculous thing disappear? He impatiently rushed forward and wanted to enter the sea of fire to take a look. But he hadn't expected that he would be greeted by a shining swordlight as soon as he got close to it. And it turned out to be the target he had been chasing for more than 5,000 kilometers, King of Hell Chu. King of Hell Chu had drilled out of the sea of fire in a high-spirited manner. He didn't run away when he saw Jing Menghun. Instead, he rushed over with even more vigor. King of Hell Chu. Jing Menghun almost died from anger. Why didn't this enemy come out earlier or later? Why did he come out at such a critical moment? Why does this bastard always spoil my plans? Is there anything that he doesn't want to meddle in? This guy has appeared at such a critical moment after I had chased him for more than 5,000 kilometers. He has ruined my beautiful dream. I can go to the upper three heavens if I have the lust dragons. Which clan wouldn't want such a treasure that can increase the chances of their clan's reproduction? Wouldn't I become a delicious cake? My grand dream of the upper three heavens has been shattered by King of Hell Chu's sudden appearance. I will have to give up on the lust dragons once he comes out. And I will have to deal with him with all my strength. But how can I give up on the lust dragons that I have already obtained? What can I do if I don't give up? A thunderous voice resounded behind Jing Menghun. The troops of Iron Cloud have arrived to meet King of Hell Chu. It will take them at most half an hour to arrive here. Killing King of Hell Chu has been going on for nearly a month now. The arduous task of traveling a distance of 11,000 kilometers has only been left for a little more than half an hour. So, this task has been going on for nearly half a month. I won't be able to stop King of Hell Chu from returning to Iron Cloud even if I don't go all out. Not to mention the lust dragons. Diwu Qing Ru alone can peel off my skin. Jing Menghun became anxious, angry, frustrated, helpless, and sad. Thousands of emotions welled up in his mind. Sour, sweet, bitter, spicy, and salty feelings welled up in his heart. Coupled with the sea of fire that covered the mountains and plains, and King of Hell Chu's sudden appearance, it was as if there were clouds in his mind. Thousands of knots appear in my heart. The sea of fire scissors the wind. King of Hell's sword flashes. King of Hell is furious. King of Hell Chu, you motherfucker, give me your life. Jing Menghun shouted, kill this bastard at all costs. The sooner the better. King-level expert Jing hadn't forgotten to kill Chu Yang as soon as possible. He wanted to chase after those two lust dragons. Jing Menghun shouted. He held his sword in his left hand, and faced Chu Yang's 10,000 fathoms of cold light. Dozens of experts in the surroundings rode their swords, and brazenly rushed forward. They turned a blind eye to the formidable lethality of Chu Yang's move. Chu Yang shouted, what harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? At the same time, the sword qi blocked the countless weapons with clanging sounds. At the same time, a murderous aura surged out. Between the heavens and the earth, a stream of light that suppressed all the flames suddenly appeared. It shot through the air with an unstoppable force, and rushed towards the countless weapons and enemies that were coming in disorder. Chu Yang's eyes were ice-cold and calm. His lips slightly bent down, and presented a cruel arc. His heart was calm, and filled with murderous intent. Countless weapons hacked down on that perfectly round beam of light with a loud bang. Even Jing Meng Hun's sword in his left hand hacked down with all his might. The sword light scattered a little. Chu Yang spat out a mouthful of blood. But the sword light still condensed, and rushed into the crowd of the Golden Horse Riders department behind Jing Meng Hun and the others. It plowed a path of blood and minced flesh like an iron plow. King of Hell Chu left a trail of minced flesh and blood wherever he passed. However, his momentum had been exhausted. He finally fell down after he had rushed for a distance of 15 feet. He was immediately surrounded. Chu Yang looked up to the sky, and laughed. He had suddenly unleashed his ferocious nature at the most critical juncture of his escape. He didn't know what was going on. He had completely ignored the fact that he had been injured. The injuries of others were still manageable. But Jing Meng Hun's all-out attack wasn't easy to deal with. However, he clearly felt that his blood was boiling. He had an inexhaustible strength. He only wanted to kill. He wanted to kill to his heart's content. Chu Yang had never experienced this kind of situation since his rebirth. His mind had been affected by the tribulation sword in his previous life. That was the only time he had experienced this kind of crazed killing. But it was clear that he was controlling the tribulation sword now. It wasn't the tribulation sword controlling him. So, how could this situation occur? Chapter 368. More than a dozen enemies had died under Ku Ren's sword. The tribulation sword's ability to devour living beings had been activated. So, his body didn't feel tired. Chu Yang roared. All the evil tendencies of his previous and current lives were suddenly aroused from the deepest part of his heart. He felt like he was going crazy with killing. It seemed that he wouldn't be able to vent his anger if he didn't kill. He dashed left and right in the crowd like a mad tiger. Wherever the tribulation sword went, the sound of weapons breaking could be heard. The tribulation sword's tip flashed with an amazing light. The sword's edge was dark red. It seemed as if a demon was baring its fangs and smiling ferociously. The sword's blade was ice-cold. It didn't get stained with blood after killing people. It was like a cold and emotionless executioner who was indifferently taking countless lives. The 3 fragments of the tribulation sword had also been aroused by this crazy killing. These 3 fragments of divine weapons had existed since ancient times. They were sharp killing weapons. The meaning of their existence, or the meaning of the tribulation sword's creation, was to kill. Now, they had officially returned to their original profession. The murderous aura was getting thicker and thicker. Jing Meng Hun was startled as he looked at Chu Yang's figure dashing left and right. This dreadful king of hell Chu hasn't only recovered from all his injuries, but has also recovered his strength. Moreover, it seems that he has made a breakthrough in his cultivation. More than one. The most frightening thing isn't that King of Hell Chu has made a breakthrough, it's that King of Hell Chu is a completely different person compared to before. King of Hell Chu has always fought when he could, and fled when he couldn't. But it's completely different this time. King of Hell Chu is besieged in the center. But he's crazily slashing and killing. He doesn't seem to care about the swords and sabers. It seems that his only thought is to kill. It seems that his goal is to kill all of us at all cost. Jing Meng Hun was startled. Then, he sneered in his heart, even if your martial power is sky high, how can you kill 3,000 of us by yourself? He soared and joined the battle. Hundreds of corpses had fallen within a radius of 400 feet around Chu Yang in a short quarter of an hour. Too many of them had been crushed by the tribulation sword, and were scattered on the ground. The pressure on Chu Yang became unprecedentedly huge once Jing Meng Hun joined the battle. However, he did his best to hold on, fighting to the death as he charged out. Fortunately, even though he had already fallen into a state of frenzy, he still remembered his original intention, which was to charge out. Get out! Chu Yang and Jing Meng Hun's sword collided with a loud bang. Jing Meng Hun was holding his sword with his left hand. Moreover, he couldn't display his full strength with his left hand due to his recent disability. However, his peak king-level expert strength was still much higher than Chu Yang's. The difference between the two sides couldn't be measured. Chu Yang's body shook, and he abruptly drew back. Blood spurted out from his nose and mouth, and he staggered. Two bang sounds were heard. It was the sound of two revered martial artists of the Golden Horse Riders Department taking advantage of this opportunity to fiercely hit him on the back. Chu Yang felt a chill on his leg with a shua sound. Then, he felt a sharp pain. A sword had slanted across his right leg and left a long and deep cut. Blood was gushing out. Chu Yang let out a loud cry. Suddenly, he flew into a rage. His long sword trembled and made a hissing sound. Suddenly, he swung his sword in a circle. The first 3 parts of the Calamity Sword and the 12 moves were all sent out at the same time. There was no pause. Then, Chu Yang didn't stop there. He launched the 4 sword moves that he had created himself at the same time. Suddenly, a volcano of sword energy erupted within a radius of 300 feet around Chu Yang's body. Countless sword lights poured out, one by one, 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 one by one. They spread in all directions with an invincible power. It seemed as if countless demons had suddenly appeared in the sky. Each of them blinked their shining eyes. They were bone-chilling, and their murderous auras soared to the sky. A loud bang sound was heard. Everyone wanted to take advantage of Chu Yang's injury. So, hundreds of people surrounded him with a rumbling sound. Everyone attacked with their swords and sabers. But, who would have thought that King of Hell Chu would launch a full-blown explosion of sword energy at such a moment? Suddenly, countless people bore the brunt of this attack. Those who were close to him didn't even have time to scream. They didn't even have time to reveal a frightened expression on their faces. They were torn to pieces by the omnipresent sword energy. 200 people died at the same time under this attack. Jing Menghun's facial muscles twitched uncontrollably as he looked at the dismembered limbs and body parts all over the ground. The corners of his eyes were also twitching. What kind of sword technique is this? Even a king-level expert like me can't achieve this kind of power. Fortunately, I didn't go forward. Otherwise, I wouldn't have died here. But, I'm afraid that I would have been injured. The entire place was silent. King of Hell Chu's black clothes were stained with blood. His body was slightly swaying, but he was still standing proudly. His eyes were still as cold as before. They were still as cruel as before. His murderous aura was still as before. His sword was in his right hand. It was flashing with a cold light. A large amount of sticky blood flowed from Chu Hengsheng's body onto the sword. Then, it slid down to the ground. The sword was spotless, bright, and ice-cold. The rest of the people stared blankly at the bloody mess that King of Hell Chu had created with his outburst of sword energy. The corners of their eyes were twitching. Their hearts were filled with fear. Yes, the enemy has suffered serious injuries. He's already swaying. It's obvious that he won't live for long. But, no one dares to fight like a cornered beast. If another outburst of sword energy like this happens again, then, the lives of 100 or 200 people will be buried in this bottomless pit. But, I don't know if I'll be among these 200 people. The sound of the army coming from behind was getting closer and closer. The entire mountain forest seemed to be trembling with the sound of the iron hooves. Even the flames in the mountains and plains seemed to be flickering. It seemed as if they were intimidated by the momentum of the galloping horses. Ironclad's reinforcements are about to arrive. Maybe they'll arrive in the next moment. Dripping blood battle technique. Jing Menghun shouted. Everyone secretly curled their lips. King-level expert Jing had shouted the words dripping blood battle technique 7 or 8 times today. But, he hadn't rushed forward to use the dripping blood battle technique. Nearly 100 people had already fallen under the urging of Jing Menghun's dripping blood battle technique. 30,000 people were fighting against one person. And, 100 of them had fallen. This was an extremely frightening number. Jing Menghun fiercely rushed forward after he finished speaking. He knew that he needed to take the lead this time. After all, the number of casualties just now was too frightening. Moreover, Ironclad's reinforcements were already close at hand. I'm afraid that this attack will be our last chance. Everyone rushed forward once again. This was the last attack. Chu Yang's body was weak. His vision had become somewhat blurry, but his blood was still burning hot. It seemed as if his soul was burning at this moment. Chu Yang had rushed out of the sea of flames. He had been besieged by 3,000 people. But he had already rushed out 7,000 feet. This was an unimaginable number. Even if Jing Menghun and Chu Yang had been in the same position, he wouldn't have been able to rush out 7,000 feet like this. However, Chu Yang's oil had finally dried up. He had no strength left after he had released that sword attack. Chu Yang would have left some strength to protect himself if this had happened in the past. But he was in a strange state this time. Even Chu Yang didn't know why he had burst out with all his strength. Jing Menghun's hideous grin was getting closer and closer. Chu Yang suddenly looked up and roared. At this moment, the tip of Calamity Sword suddenly emitted an ice-cold aura. In an instant, Chu Yang's meridians were filled with this cold energy. It was about to erupt. 7 shades cold energy. Chu Yang woke up with a start. He waved his hand, and a vast expanse of white cold energy spread out. Frost covered the ground wherever it passed. It was freezing cold. Jing Menghun and the other experts who had surrounded him suddenly felt their bodies freeze. A fast horse rushed out of the bend in the distance. It shouted like a clap of thunder, "Stop!" Its voice was shrill and anxious. It even had a hint of a female voice. 2 people's silhouettes jumped up from their horses. They rushed out like lightning. It seemed as if they were walking in the air. They crossed hundreds of feet in a flash. Then, they flashed again, and got a lot closer. They floated in the air like shadows. It seemed as if they were in a dream. Jing Menghun finally launched an attack. Countless experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department launched a frenzied bombardment at the last moment. Chu Yang was in the middle of the attack. He didn't hold back any of his strength. He transferred all of his strength to his sword. The 12 moves of the Tribulation Sword suddenly burst out. A storm was set off again. However, it was so cold that it could freeze 1,000 miles this time. It was completely different from the previous attack. Countless screams resounded at the same time. Many experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department lost their lives under this move. They were frozen stiff. Then, they turned into chunks of frozen meat and danced in the air. At the same time, close to 300 people lost their lives in this explosion. The surroundings looked like an Azura hell. It was too horrible to look at. Jing Menghun screamed hoarsely. His shoulder, thigh, and chest were stabbed. He flew up with blood dripping from his body. He roared in the air, "It's over. Retreat." He hadn't expected that he would suffer such injuries under such a dense siege. He had to leave first. The 2 people who were rushing over were clearly Tai Bu Tian's shadow bodyguards. He would lose his life if he didn't leave under the siege of these 2 people. Chu Yang groaned miserably. The enemy had attacked him with all their might. He had been hit by 7 swords, 3 sabers, and 1 kick from Jing Menghun. Chu Yang felt as if his internal organs were about to rupture. He was thrown high up in the air, and tumbled down. He lost consciousness the moment he was thrown up. 2 silhouettes rushed over at lightning speed, and caught Chu Yang in their arms as he fell from the sky. Chapter 369. The Ironclad's army rushed in like a tide. Bu Tian Pavilion's people and the 2 shadow experts joined the army to chase and kill the remaining 2,000 experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department. However, these 2,000 experts weren't mediocre. 500 of them were killed, and 30 or 40 were captured. However, the rest of them had already fled without a trace. Jing Menghun was the first to escape. He had already fled far away. Chu Yang was lying unconscious in Tai Bu Tian's arms. Tai Bu Tian felt that Chu Yang's body was getting hotter and hotter even though he was unconscious. In fact, he felt like a stove. The 2 shadow experts' gazes were somewhat evasive as they returned. Tai Bu Tian hurriedly asked as if she had seen her saviors when she saw the 2 shadow experts return, "Uncles, look, what's wrong with him?" The two shadow experts had already known what had happened from the mouths of the captives. So, they could have guessed what had happened when they saw Chu Yang's appearance. They couldn't help but sigh and say, "I'm afraid, this man can't be saved." Can't be saved? Tai Bu Tian felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her body swayed, and her vision went dark. She asked, "He's still breathing. Moreover, his pulse is very strong. How can he be saved?" "He's poisoned," the shadow said. He then sighed, "Moreover, there's no antidote for this poison." No antidote? Tai Bu Tian was on the verge of collapse. She weakly asked, "What kind of poison is so overbearing? How? This is the lust poison of a lust dragon. We are in the wilderness. There are no women in the army. It's difficult to even find a village girl here." One of the shadow experts suddenly stopped talking, and grimaced in pain. It was another shadow who pinched him fiercely. Lust dragon? Lust poison? However, Tai Bu Tian had already heard it. Her eyes lit up. She thought for a while and said, "Is it the lust dragon whose body will fester and die if it's not detoxified within 5 hours?" One of the two shadows lowered his head, and the other one looked around as if he hadn't heard anything. "Is it?" Tai Bu Tian asked angrily. "It's hard to say." One of the shadow experts stammered. Then, he said, "But, you don't have to do anything for him even if it's true. After all, as he spoke, he was pinched again. So, he took a step back and didn't say anything else. Tai Butian looked at the other figure with a questioning gaze. "What's going on?" Her expression gradually darkened. "It's his fate that he's in this state." That shadow said, "Moreover, our Iron Cloud already has King of Hell Chu. We don't need to have two. Besides, this person has always been arrogant and unruly. Besides, the war is imminent. It's really not a good idea to." Tai Butian's gaze was like water as he looked at Chu Yang's face. The expression on his face was constantly changing. One could tell that he was struggling intensely in his heart. After a long time, he finally gritted his teeth, turned his head, and said in a hoarse voice, "Prepare a carriage to send him back." His voice was weak, and he seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The two shadows heaved a sigh of relief at the same time as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. After exchanging glances, they hurriedly went to carry out the orders. At this time, Wu Kuangyun strolled over and stretched his neck to take a look. He couldn't help but shrug his shoulders and laugh. "So it's this little bastard. This guy still owes me a huge debt that he hasn't paid back yet." Tai Butian looked at the dark knight with a stupefied expression. His face was expressionless. He stood there motionless. It seemed as if the ruler of Iron Cloud had suddenly turned into a wooden sculpture. The carriage arrived, and Chu Yang was placed on it. The army then began to move back. Tai Butian followed beside the carriage from beginning to end. He didn't say a word. His expression was one of pain. His teeth were tightly biting his lips until his lower lip turned into tea. The two shadows looked at him worriedly. They didn't leave his side even for an inch. "Your Majesty, there's news." Wu Kuangyun held a messenger falcon in his hand. He was sweating profusely as he ran over. "There are 3 cavalry troops rushing in our direction at top speed. They're less than 700 miles away from here." "How far do we have to go back?" Tai Butian asked in a stupefied manner. "There are still 350 li left." Wu Kuangyun bluntly said, "But most of us are infantry. The enemy is cavalry. Moreover, they've already unleashed their speed. Even if we can go back, we'll still have to organize people to withdraw." Tai Butian understood the underlying meaning of these words. "It's not optimistic. The army is under your command. You must return to the slanting valley before the enemy does, no matter what method you use. Then, organize people to withdraw into the heaven-splitting mountain pass." Tai Butian made a prompt decision and gave the order. "Then, what about you, Your Majesty?" Wu Kuangyun was startled. He was startled. "Uncles Ying and I will find a way to go back," Tai Butian said. He then stretched out his hand and pointed, "Leave this man and the carriage behind. You go first. You won't be able to move quickly if you take him with you." "No." Wu Kuangyun was startled. "Execute the order." Tai Butian looked at him fiercely. You'll be punished for treason if you dare to say another word. Then, he comforted him, don't worry. We'll follow behind the army. We'll follow them if we can. If we can't, I'll have 2 king-level experts by my side. So, there won't be any danger. He paused and said, I'll personally explain to Supreme Commander Tai no matter what the situation is this time. You don't need to show up. Wu Kuang-yun didn't listen to him no matter what he said. Wu Kuang-yun didn't have the guts to leave the emperor behind in the middle of a burning wilderness at such a critical time. You won't go. Tai Butian's eyes suddenly sharpened. He unsheathed his sword with a shua sound. The next moment, he placed it on his own neck. I'll die here if you don't go. Wu Kuang-yun was sweating profusely. His eyes were at a loss. You still won't go? Tai Butian shouted. There was already a bloody mark on his neck. Wu Kuang-yun shouted. He was filled with endless grief. Your Majesty, take care. Old Wu is going. He jumped up and mounted his horse. Then, he crazily issued orders. The rear army changed to the front army. The entire army sped up. Wu Kuang-yun led the cavalry to the front of the army. Hurry back and guard the mountain pass as soon as possible. Then, I'll personally come out to meet your Majesty. Then I have no choice but to risk my life. Wu Kuang-yun, Iron Cloud Nation is in your hands from this moment on. As long as you guard the heaven-splitting mountain pass, there's still hope. If you can't guard it, then this will be the only time in my life that I, the Emperor of Iron Cloud Nation, will have to pay a high price. Tai Butian muttered in his heart. He recalled that he had acted impulsively for the sake of that person in the carriage. But now, his life was hanging by a thread. His body was poisoned. But, Tai Butian couldn't help but feel confused as he thought of this. Tai Butian followed the carriage. She wasn't at the rear of the army. Let Wu Kuang-yun take the lead in this situation. This is the best choice. Of course, I can lead the team. But, what about Chu Yang? He can't withstand any more bumps. Moreover, he can't hold on for such a long time. Tai Butian bit his lip. He still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. His eyes were constantly darting back and forth. This place is too desolate. Moreover, we just passed through a big fire. What should I do? What should I do? Time passed little by little. Tai Butian had already followed the army for dozens of miles. The army in front was getting farther and farther away. Their voices were getting softer and softer. Tai Butian suddenly reined in his horse. Then, he jumped down. He squatted on the ground. He was motionless. His shoulders were shaking. It seemed, he was crying. The 2 shadows looked at each other. Then, they sighed deeply. A muffled groan came from the carriage. The 3 of them turned their heads to look. They saw that the unconscious Chu Yang's body was twitching uncontrollably. His face and the exposed skin on his body had already turned red. He's in great pain. If he wants, I'll give him a quick death, one of the shadows said. Then, he walked towards the carriage. Don't you dare! Tai Butian shouted. He jumped up and stood in front of the carriage. His eyes were red. They looked at each other. Tai Butian's eyes revealed an awe-inspiring determination. He lowered his head after a long time. He said, find me a secluded place. Tai Butian's body suddenly trembled as he said this. You! The 2 shadows cried out in shock. That's the only way. Tai Butian smiled sadly. But, Icy Heart Jade Bone, one of the shadows said anxiously, what if? What will happen? You will be beaten to death by your master. Icy Heart Jade Bone. Tai Butian smiled indifferently. He said, if he's no longer here, who will I guard my icy heart for? Who will I guard my jade bone for? He smiled faintly, yet somewhat perplexedly, and said, as for master, could it be that I can still be her disciple in this lifetime? The 2 shadows were speechless. Tai Shi-cheng only had Tai Butian as his only descendant. He was now the ruler of Iron Cloud Nation. How could he still be mother's disciple? But, it's not worth it. One of the shadows was anxious. He doesn't even know about your life. And, what does it have to do with whether he knows or not? Tai Butian smiled. This has nothing to do with him. Can you? The two shadows were tongue-tied. Can I still have a child with him? Tai Butian smiled sadly. It's because he doesn't know anything that there's less entanglement. Over. The shadows were speechless. With Tai Butian's status, it was impossible. Since that's the case, what does it matter? Tai Butian said indifferently, this is my business. It has nothing to do with him, and it has nothing to do with you, and it has nothing to do with my master. There was a resolute look on his face. It's my business. It's my business alone. He turned around and looked at the two shadows sadly. After the struggle for the lower three heavens is over, whether it succeeds or not, he's going to leave. Once he leaves, we may never see each other again. Just let me have these memories in my life, okay? Chapter 370. Tai Butian turned around and looked at the flames that were still burning around her. She said slowly, in my entire life, when I was a baby, perhaps I had experienced joy before. But I have no memories of it. Ever since father was injured, I've had a heavy burden on my shoulders. I've never experienced any joy, nor have I had any friends. I've also never had anyone that I liked, much less any vows of unconditional love. That kind of deep love, that kind of feeling of deep love. Ever since I was born, I've been alone. Other girls can still admire flowers, plant grass, and mourn over the pain of spring as the joy of their boudoir. As for me, I can't even think about it. What has accompanied me from the beginning to the end has been a ruthless and merciless path, the path of an emperor. As father's only flesh and blood, this is my responsibility and I can't shirk it. But who would have thought that even if I were to rule the world, I would still be an ordinary girl? I have my own dreams too. But other people's dreams have a chance to come true, but mine has never. It's simply impossible. When I'm under pressure, I also want a shoulder to lean on and an embrace to make me cry. But I can only persevere and face all the cruelty and coldness with a fearless attitude. Yes, this is my responsibility, but, unknowingly, Tai Butian's face was already filled with tears. But, to put all of this on me, to make me, a weak girl, face the hardships of life, to control this secret so tightly. Moreover, it's a secret that has no end. Facing a hopeless future, to hide all of my youth behind a mask until I grow old. Don't you think this is too cruel? Don't you think this is too cruel? Tai Butian said hoarsely. The two figures sighed sadly and looked at each other speechlessly. But today, I want to save him. Even if I have to give up everything I have to save him. And even if I don't get anything in return after giving up all this, I'm willing to let this dream disappear without a trace. I'll only be willful this once. I'll just be willful this once, Tai Butian murmured, but I only hope that you will never tell him. We can never let him know. So this is my matter alone. Under the illumination of the firelight, two clear streaks of tears streamed down his face. It's just a pity that your icy heart jade bone divine art is about to advance further. Shadow looked up at the sky and sighed. That's what your master said, she'll come to pick you up, haha. Perhaps by the time she came. Tai Butian looked at the mountain full of fire in the dark night and said, the world has already changed. Then, he smiled, isn't this mountain of fire more beautiful than the most beautiful candlelight in the world? His eyes flashed with a trace of shyness, and a trace of sweetness. Perhaps this time, he thought of something he would never get, the pair of red candles on the beautiful wedding night. At this moment, his eyes were filled with confusion, yet they were also filled with the sweetness of fantasy. Chu Yang felt sore all over his body when he woke up. But, there was also an indescribable carefree feeling in his body. He groaned and sat up. Using all the strength in his body, he managed to half sit up. At this time, he discovered that his body was swaying, as if he was on a moving carriage. Was it Ironcloud's carriage or Great Zhao's carriage? Chu Yang was puzzled. Looking at the soft bedding and the soft quilt covering his body, he knew that if the people of Great Zhao caught him, they wouldn't give him such preferential treatment. You're awake. A voice came from outside, indifferent and dignified. Then, the curtain of the carriage lifted and Tai Butian floated in. An ordinary person could get on the carriage with a single step, but Tai Butian, an emperor with a certain level of martial arts, actually floated in using her lightness skill. "What are you showing off in front of me?" Chu Yang couldn't help but want to laugh. He said weakly, "Why are you here?" Tai Butian's face was a little yellow, and her body seemed very tired. She sat down opposite Chu Yang, but frowned slightly, revealing a trace of pain between her brows. She said lightly, "You don't need to know why I'm here. I only want to ask you, you've slept for a day and a night. How do you feel?" Chu Yang was stunned. This tone was actually a kind of superior tone. Moreover, there was a natural coldness in her voice that kept people 1,000 miles away. He couldn't help but be shocked. He looked up and asked in surprise, "What's wrong with you?" "I've been under a lot of pressure these days." Tai Butian looked at him for a while, her eyes expressionless. Then, she moved her gaze away and said, "The flames of war have been lit. Great Zhao's army is pressing on the border. Fortunately, you came back at this time. Perhaps you can share some of my burden." Chu Yang looked at Tai Butian with a sharp gaze. He clearly felt that there was something wrong with Tai Butian today. He seemed to be deliberately distancing the two of them. "Could something have happened while I was away?" Chu Yang thought and said lightly, "It's just that my ability is limited. I'm afraid I may not be able to help much." He had risked his life for Iron Cloud. Now, the Emperor of Iron Cloud was actually so cold to him. Chu Yang's tone was a little cold. "Minister Chu." Tai Butian's eyes drifted and looked at him. Then, she looked away and said, "But Minister Chu will still help me, won't you?" Chu Yang suddenly felt a little suffocated. He chuckled and said, "Of course. I will definitely do what I say." When he finished, Chu Yang closed his eyes. It was obvious that he didn't want to talk to her anymore. What could he say to an arrogant emperor? Tai Butian would never lower his head to him, but it was even more impossible for him to lower his head to her. Chu Yang rarely showed his arrogance, but the pride in his bones was something that no one in this world could reach. Since Tai Butian was so cold, he would definitely not use his warm face to kiss her cold butt. "That's good." Tai Butian led the way and smiled. Her sharp gaze circled around Chu Yang's face. She seemed to want to say something, but she held back and said coldly, "Recuperate well." As she spoke, she suddenly coughed a few times uncontrollably. Her eyebrows furrowed even tighter. The pained expression on her face became more and more obvious, as if she was enduring great pain. But Chu Yang's eyes were closed and he didn't see it. Then, Tai Butian got off the carriage. The sound of curtains being lifted sounded. Then, Tai Butian got on another carriage. It turned out that there were two carriages. Chu Yang snorted in his heart. This emperor was really getting more and more arrogant. He clearly saw thousands of troops coming to rescue him. In such an urgent situation, he actually came in a carriage. He really knew how to be comfortable. Sure enough, after one became an emperor, one's temperament and habits would change. The previous Butian was too diligent. Perhaps he would never return. Thinking of this, Chu Yang suddenly felt bored to death. If it wasn't to reverse fate and save Qing Wu, he really wanted to leave just like that. When the battle is over and Diwu Qingru is defeated, I, Chu Yang, will definitely not stay here for another day. The carriage moved forward slowly. The journey seemed to be getting more and more difficult. Chu Yang slowly felt that the surroundings were a little too quiet. Other than Tai Butian's carriage beside him, there seemed to be no other sound. Chu Yang circulated his qi and adjusted his breathing. When he thought of that earth-shattering final attack, he still felt a lingering fear. He actually survived such an attack. Even he felt that it was inconceivable. He called the sword spirit a few times, but this time, something strange happened. No matter how he called, the sword spirit didn't respond. He didn't know that Chu Yang had also erupted with unprecedented power in that final attack. He had killed nearly 300 people in one fell swoop. However, the other party clearly knew that this was their last chance. Almost everyone was fighting with their lives on the line. More than 1,000 people from all directions simultaneously attacked Chu Yang with their greatest strength. How could Chu Yang withstand such an attack by himself? This was a head-on attack. There was no room for any tricks. At the final juncture, when Chu Yang's body was about to be beaten into minced meat, The sword spirit finally couldn't control himself and rushed out. He took over Chu Yang's body, and used all the strength of his spirit body to resist this earth-shattering fatal attack for Chu Yang, but after that, the sword spirit also exhausted all its strength, and fell into a deep sleep. At that time, Chu Yang had already fallen into a coma. So, the sword spirit didn't even have time to tell him. Although the sword spirit knew that Chu Yang's body had a hidden problem that needed to be solved urgently, it was powerless to do anything. Moreover, it couldn't do anything even if it had been awake. Later, Chu Yang also fell into a coma. So, everything could only be left to fate. Chu Yang looked at his body. His meridians had almost been destroyed. He bitterly smiled, and summoned the sword spirit. He took out an incomplete version of the heavy pill, and swallowed it. This heavy pill wasn't the complete version of the mysterious ice jade ointment. However, it was still a first-class healing medicine in the world. Chu Yang's injuries looked serious. However, they were still within the range of treatment. After taking the heavy pill, Chu Yang felt that his body was slowly regaining strength in less than half an hour. The injuries in his body were also slowly getting better. Another 2 hours passed. He finally felt that he could move. He sat up, and breathed in and out a few times. Then, he felt that his whole body was relaxed. Moreover, it seemed as if some kind of shackle that had been binding him had suddenly broken. He felt as if his body was floating. Chu Yang tried to raise his energy. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes wide in shock. He didn't know when his spiritual power had broken through the bottleneck. It had reached the first grade of king level. First grade of Sword King. What's going on? How did I break through when I was injured? Chapter 371. Chu Yang couldn't sit still as he thought of this. He lifted the curtain of the carriage and was about to jump down. However, he was shocked as soon as he lifted the curtain. He almost couldn't believe his eyes. I'm clearly still in the mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect. But, where's the army? The army that came last night was clearly Ironcloud's army. How come there's not even a shadow of a person? Am I dreaming? Smoke was still coming out of the mountain forest all around. There were still some weak flames in some places. Beside him, there was another carriage that looked very simple and crude. There were 2 carriages and 2 coachmen. Other than that, there was only himself and Tai Butian sitting in the carriage. There were 4 people in total. They didn't make a sound. Only the sound of the wheels was heard. What's going on? Chu Yang couldn't help but ask, why are there only these few people? The 2 coachmen acted as if the world owed them 800 strings of coins. They kept a straight face and didn't speak. They just drove the carriage forward as if they didn't hear Chu Yang's question. I'm asking you a question, Chu Yang said angrily. Shut up. A reprimand was heard. King of Hell Chu was a little dumbfounded because this was what his coachman had said. Since when are coachmen so awesome? Chu Yang's body floated out of the carriage, and landed on the roof of the carriage. He looked down from above, and became even more certain of his guess. Big Tree is gone. Chu Yang shrank back and stuck out his tongue as he looked at the 2 coachmen. If I'm not wrong, these 2 should be the 2 shadow experts who are always by Tai Bu Tian's side. They're like shadows. Damn. No wonder they're so stupid. This was the first time that Chu Yang had seen the true appearances of these 2 shadows. He saw that these 2 people looked as if they had been cast from the same mold. They were tall and thin, and wore grey robes. In fact, it seemed as if a piece of cloth had been hung from a bamboo pole. Their cheekbones were high and their eye sockets were deep. They didn't have a single ounce of meat on their bodies. They were about 50 years old. He didn't speak, but this shadow didn't let him go. You're fine? You can jump. You're recovering very fast. You're really lucky. No matter how Chu Yang listened to these words, it sounded a little strange. It seemed that they had a lot of complaints. He could not help but ask, what's wrong? What happened? In order to save you, His Majesty sent an army of 500,000 soldiers out of the mountain pass to provide support. The mountain pass is currently being besieged by an enemy army of more than 1 million soldiers. Everyone has gone back to provide support. Only the few of us are left. Do you understand now? What? Chu Yang was shocked. He didn't expect that Tai Butian would actually take such a huge risk for him. This was practically putting the fate of the entire country on the same scale as his, and his weight was obviously heavier. This was a huge risk. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a little touched. He thought to himself, no wonder Tai Butian's expression is so foul. So that's why. Because of one person, the entire Iron Cloud Nation was in danger. No matter who it was, they would not be in a good mood. The two Yingxins were also very surprised. Although Chu Yang's aphrodisiac had been removed, it was impossible for him to be alive and kicking right now. When he was unconscious, both of them had checked his pulse. His injuries were so serious that they couldn't be any worse. How could he be able to walk and jump now? Moreover, he didn't seem to have any major problems. His vitality was too strong, wasn't it? On the other side, Tai Butian didn't move at all. She seemed to have fallen asleep. The three of them didn't know that Tai Butian was lying in the carriage. She was in so much pain that she was sweating all over. Her face was pale and her clothes were almost soaked with sweat. Chu Yang's aphrodisiac was extremely overbearing. Tai Butian was still a virgin. How could she withstand such a high intensity and almost cruel ravaging? When the aphrodisiac was removed, Tai Butian died countless times. In the end, she was almost on her last breath. It was also thanks to Chu Yang's lack of consciousness that his actions were only subconscious. Most of the time, it was Tai Butian who took the lead. That was why she didn't really die. Now, Tai Butian still felt like her whole body was being torn apart. She was in intense pain. It was already not easy for her to be able to resist the urge to look at Chu Yang. Minister Chu, this old man is much older than you. There's something I don't know if I should say. Ying said. Elder, please speak. There's no harm in it, Chu Yang said with a smile. Minister Chu is so young. I don't think you have a wife yet. Although it was a question, Ying's tone was certain. I don't have a wife yet, Chu Yang said frankly. Yes, if there's a woman who loves Minister Chu wholeheartedly and is willing to give up everything for him, would Minister Chu be moved? There was a hint of grievance in Ying's voice. He said, I'll be the matchmaker, Ying. Tai Butian's somewhat angry voice came from the carriage beside them. How can Minister Chu's marriage be forced by others? Ying touched his beard embarrassedly and didn't say anything. I already have someone I love. Chu Yang knew what he was getting at. He rejected him cleanly. I'm very fond of her and I love her very much. I don't want to be a second person in my life. Ying had already been stopped by Tai Butian. He didn't want to say anything else. But when he heard this, he flew into a rage. He couldn't control his temper anymore. He said sternly, Are you indifferent when others have sacrificed so much for you? No matter how much others have sacrificed for me, it's not a reason for me to have a change of heart, right? Chu Yang looked at this somewhat angry old man with amusement. He asked with interest, I just don't know, who is this person you're talking about? Humph. Ying snorted angrily. He turned his head and ignored Chu Yang. Chu Yang's mind turned at lightning speed. He had an idea. This old man was probably talking about Wu Qianqian. After all, Wu Qianqian had been in contact with these two old men since Sai Sai wasn't in Iron Cloud. It seemed that these two old men were matchmaking for Wu Qianqian today. Thinking of Wu Qianqian, Chu Yang couldn't help but sigh deeply. Wu Qianqian was deeply in love with him. How could he not know? However, his entire life was for Qing Wu. No matter what others did, the person he couldn't let down was Mo Qing Wu. Wu Qianqian was naturally a peerless beauty. Moreover, she had an orchid heart, outstanding talent, and resourceful mind. Therefore, she was one of the top choices at this time. However, Chu Yang only had Mo Qing Wu in his heart. The huge regret from his previous life had tied Chu Yang's heart into a dead knot. Other than Mo Qing Wu, there was probably no one else in this world who could undo Chu Yang's love knot. From the beginning to the end, Chu Yang had never thought about what kind of ending he would have with Wu Qianqian. He didn't even have such thoughts. As for other people, they probably wouldn't. In the other carriage, Tai Butian's expression was dim. She sighed deeply with self-pity. Sure enough, Chu Yang had someone in his heart. Since that was the case, wouldn't it be best to bury this matter? Besides, even if Chu Yang didn't have anyone in his heart, what could she do? With her identity as the ruler of a country, could she still marry him? Tai Butian comforted herself. She seemed to have thought it through and made up her mind. However, 2 strings of tears quietly dripped down from her eyes, soaking the pillow. She gently reached out and wiped the tears away. However, the tears quickly gushed out again, as if they would never stop. Let me cry just once. While he's still beside me. Although he didn't know, there was another indescribable silence. In this place of silence, Chu Yang clearly felt that it was full of oppression, as if it would explode at any moment. After a long time, Tai Butian's somewhat tired voice came from the side. Minister Chu's body recovers really quickly. Chu Yang chuckled and said, "It's just that my skin is rough and my flesh is thick." Since the misunderstanding between him and Tai Butian had been cleared, Chu Yang naturally wouldn't continue to treat her coldly. Last night, I threw Minister Chu's black clothes into the fire and burned them. Tai Butian said slowly. However, after burning them, I felt that something was wrong. Minister Chu, could there be something in your clothes that you can't let go of? Or a very important secret? Something that I can't let go of? A very important secret? Chu Yang was startled. He scratched his head in confusion and asked, "What does your Majesty mean?" "Oh, since there's nothing, I can rest assured." Tai Butian smiled and said, "Because when the clothes were burned, there was clearly a smell of roasted hair. If it was only from Minister Chu's body, there wouldn't be so much smell." "Haha, Yuan Cheng worried too much." Chu Yang smiled and said, "Your Majesty may not know, but my clothes were stained with too much blood, or perhaps there were pieces of flesh and blood from the enemy's corpse. Naturally, there would be that smell after burning them." Tai Butian smiled and said, or maybe I haven't experienced it before." She was puzzled. The smell of burning flesh and blood was not the same as that. However, she didn't continue the discussion on this topic. "Minister Chu, you and I are not monarch and minister, nor are we colleagues." Tai Butian said carefully, "Minister Chu has a great future and will definitely not be limited to this small lower 3 heavens. Then, dare I ask, in Minister Chu's heart, what kind of position am I, the Emperor of Iron Cloud?" Tai Bu Tian spoke slowly. But, there was a faint sense of urgency in his tone. "Ha ha." Chu Yang touched his nose awkwardly and smiled. He felt that this question was really not easy to answer. Tai Butian waited quietly and didn't urge him. "Your Majesty, and I really don't know what to say." Chu Yang smiled calmly and said, "From the beginning, you and I were destined to have a cooperative relationship. Our goal was to defeat Diwu Qingru. And the relationship between us was also built on this foundation. However, I, Chu Yang, still admire your Majesty's character. During this period of time, I have cooperated with your Majesty countless times. I also have a good impression of your Majesty. In fact, we have a tacit understanding." Chu Yang deliberated and said, "In such a situation, I don't dare to say that we are brothers. But, I can say that we are friends." Chapter 372. Friend. Friend. Tai Butian's voice was very soft, as if she was at a loss. Then, she smiled and said, "To have a friend like Minister Chu in this life, it is indeed unforgettable. In the history of emperors, who is lucky enough to have a true friend in their life? Your Majesty is right." Chu Yang laughed and said, "Actually, not only emperors, even ordinary people will not have many true friends in their life. Some people will not treat them with sincerity in their life, and they will not treat anyone with sincerity in their life. Such people are more suitable than emperors." "Ha ha." Tai Butian laughed sincerely and said, "From what Minister Chu means, Yuan Cheng is very pitiful." "Very pitiful indeed." Chu Yang said seriously, "It is lonely at the top. Emperors are like this. When they sit on the throne and accept the glory of being the supreme ruler of the world, they are also destined to be lonely for the rest of their life." As soon as these words were spoken, Tai Butian suddenly fell silent. After a long time, A long sigh could be heard coming from the carriage. A soft, almost inaudible voice said faintly, "The Emperor is lonely. G family, friend, ha ha." The two figures also sighed respectively. It was not clear whether they were sighing for themselves or for others. In short, the meaning was complicated and difficult to understand. In the other carriage, Tai Butian looked at the roof of the carriage with lifeless eyes. For a long time, her eyes did not move. "Friend. Ha ha, friend. Not bad. You fought hundreds of battles for me. You came up with hundreds of plans for me. You killed madly for me. You risked your life for me. Yuan Cheng treats me as a friend. I am deeply in love for you. I am afraid for you. I am willing to do anything for you. I am willing to give up my chastity for you. I will do everything I can for you. I will give up everything I have, even the country. Yuan Cheng, we are friends." Tai Butian's heart was indescribable. At this moment, she actually had the urge to cry out loud. The bitterness and despair in her heart made her want to pull out her sword immediately and kill herself in front of Chu Yang. But she still controlled her almost uncontrollable emotions. She took deep breaths, deep breaths. Tears flowed down quietly like broken pearls. Sigh, why is she crying again? Didn't I say not to cry again? Why are you crying now? Tai Butian, you're so useless. Friends, just friends. Chu Yang's words had set the tone between the two of them. Finally, Tai Butian smiled. Friends aren't bad either. Just as he had said, how many emperors from ancient times to the present had friends? As Chu Yang had said, how many true friends could there be among ordinary people? Haha, we'll probably have to wait until the battle at the mountain pass is over before we can return to the mountain pass. There's still a long way to go. Tai Bu Tian smiled and said, Minister Chu, why don't you tell me about yourself? Take it as a way to relieve the loneliness of this journey. How about it? Journey? Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Your Majesty is really relaxed. Don't tell me that Your Majesty doesn't care about this war that concerns the fate of the two nations at all. Even if I do, what can I do? Tai Butian smiled and said, I've already done what I should. As for the rest, whether I win or lose, I can accept it. When I was anxious, it was the same. When I wasn't anxious, it was still the same. Why do I have to take it to heart? Your Majesty is really open-minded. Chu Yang was in awe. As an emperor, it was really commendable to have such a breadth of mind. Ha ha ha. Tai Butian laughed very happily. Your Majesty, what do you want to hear? Chu Yang asked. Since we're friends, it's not very appropriate for Minister Chu to keep calling me Your Majesty, Tai Butian smiled and said. Both of them didn't notice that a strange expression would appear on the faces of the two shadows every time Tai Bu Tian and Chu Yang would say the word friend. In fact, they would have a very complicated and indescribable look in their eyes. But Your Majesty still keeps calling me Minister Chu. Chu Yang laughed and said, Since we're friends, what does it matter what I call you? What does Your Majesty want me to call you? Tai Butian was speechless. Yes, what does Your Majesty want me to call you? Butian. Iron brother? Isn't this rubbing salt on my wound? Does Your Majesty want Chu Yang to call me Little Tian Tian, the special name used by my father before I was 3 years old? That's even more impossible. Then what should I call him? Brother Chu? Taiyuan, Yang Yang? He probably won't agree to it either. Chu Yang. That's even more impossible. Let's just call it that. Haha, Minister Chu is right. Between friends, there's no need to care about the name. Tai Butian laughed heartily. I'm very interested in the person that Minister Chu can't forget. Minister Chu, why don't you tell me about it? Huh. Chu Yang was a little dumbfounded. To be able to make someone like Minister Chu fall in love with her wholeheartedly, Minister Chu would only take one out of the 3,000 beauties in the world of mortals. In fact, he usually keeps himself clean and never gets involved with women. He doesn't even dare to provoke any feelings. Tai Butian's voice was very strange. It was hard to tell what it meant. He would rather hide his handsome looks with a ferocious mask. In this life, his only for one person. I'm really curious. What kind of amazing woman can make Minister Chu fall in love with her so deeply? Tai Butian asked. Ha! Chu Yang thought of Mo Qingwu and couldn't help but be fascinated. The corners of his mouth also revealed a smile that was either bitter or sweet. It's hard to say, Chu Yang said softly. Tell me about it. Tai Butian was full of interest. She added in her heart, I want to know where I'm lacking in comparison to her. She's a very silly girl. Chu Yang thought for a while and finally said, and she's also very naive. She always gives to me without any complaints or regrets. She's never asked for anything. This sentence made Tai Butian's heart tremble. When I have to be with her, I can do whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. I don't consider what she'll think at all. But she's never stopped me either. She only silently supported and encouraged me. There was even one time when I got bored and asked her to leave. She didn't say anything either. She just stood in a corner and watched me quietly, waiting for me. There's still such a silly girl nowadays. Tai Butian couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Her health wasn't good. She was injured when she was young. She was destined to not have much success in this life. So she always felt inferior when she was with me. Chu Yang subconsciously checked the heavy pill carved on the hilt of the tribulation sword. He said, and I was just so muddle-headed. I didn't know regret. Finally, one day, she left me. Only then did I know how important she was. Without her, my life was completely bleak. At that time, I was obsessed with the sword. But when she was about to leave me, she summoned all her courage and told me with all the grievances and anger she felt when she was with me. Chu Yang, I'm prettier than the sword. Speaking till here, Chu Yang's heart ached. He thought of that heart-wrenching afternoon in his previous life. The setting sun was like blood, the purple bamboo was like the sea. Mo Qingwu was dressed in red, lying in his arms, bathed in blood. She said Chu Yang, I'm prettier than the sword with her dying breath. His heart suddenly convulsed in pain. Every time he thought of this sentence, he always felt that it was filled with a different kind of sadness. It was as if it could give him a different feeling every time. Tai Butian was silent. As if she could feel the pain in Chu Yang's heart, she sighed in her heart. Recently, I finally found her again. This time, I swear that I'll treat her well. I'll do everything I can and let her be the most blessed woman in the whole heaven. Chu Yang said softly. She's really lucky to have met someone as determined as you. Tai Butian said softly. Her heart ached endlessly. She was very envious of this girl who was lucky enough to have all of Chu Yang's love. She was also very jealous. It should be said that meeting her is also my luck, the greatest blessing. Chu Yang smiled happily. Thinking of how he healed Qingwu's injuries and let her live a happy and worry-free life, he was full of blessings. Yes. You're all lucky. How does she look? She must be very beautiful, right? Tai Butian asked. Outstanding beauty, peerless in her generation, devastatingly beautiful. Chu Yang said with certainty, I've never seen a girl more beautiful than her in this world. He thought for a while and said, her style, her elegance, her temperament, her looks, her figure, her temperament, any aspect of her is unparalleled in the world. Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, her beauty doesn't belong to this world. This time, Tai Butian was even more silent. In the carriage, Tai Butian looked at her lower body with a somewhat helpless gaze. The wound there seemed to be fresh blood flowing out again. But the pain now was far from being comparable to the pain in her heart. While Chu Yang was praising his sweetheart non-stop, he was completely unaware that Tai Butian's heart had already broken into pieces in despair. Chu Yang's face was smiling and his heart was filled with happiness. The battle has already begun. After defeating Diwu Qingru, I'll go to the third heaven to meet Qingwu. Suddenly, he felt something strange beside him. His gaze turned sideways and he suddenly realized that on the two carriages, there were two shadows looking at him furiously. The anger in their eyes seemed to want to swallow Chu Yang whole. In that case, I'm even more curious. Tai Butian forced a smile and said, when can Minister Chu bring her along and let me see this unparalleled beauty in this world? She smiled and said, Qianqian is already an unparalleled beauty. I really want to see what a girl more beautiful than Qianqian looks like. Chapter 373. Chu Yang wisely chose to evade this question. If he didn't evade it, he would really offend her. For a long time, Tai Butian didn't speak. Instead, she laughed softly. Her laughter carried an unfathomable flavor. She said, "Minister Chu, Miss Chen Chen is deeply in love with you. Don't tell me you're not moved at all." Chu Yang pondered for a long time. Then, he smiled bitterly. Then, he replied seriously, "Your Majesty, I don't want to repeat this question. You and I are the same. We're both men. Since we're men, we have responsibilities that we can't shirk. You have your responsibilities. That is the road to the emperor and the world. And I have my responsibilities. My responsibilities are the responsibilities of a little man. Chen Chen is a beautiful flower. She's talented and knowledgeable. She's also very infatuated with me. How can I not be moved? Since I'm a man, I have lust. I think you won't deny this point. But, do I have to let down another person I love if I'm moved?" Chu Yang smiled bitterly and said, "Let time smooth over everything." He paused and said, "Your Majesty, you're also a man. You should understand my feelings." Tai Butian was silent for a long time. Then, she finally smiled bitterly and sighed. "I'm also a man." Chu Yang frowned. The emotions revealed in Tai Butian's words were so helpless and sorrowful. Could it be that he also had a girl whom he loved painstakingly but couldn't get? Suddenly, he understood. It seemed that Tai Butian liked Wu Chen Chen, but Wu Chen Chen liked him. Yes, it must be so. The two shadows really wanted to block their ears. They didn't want to listen to Chu Yang anymore. Hearing this guy say "You're also a man and you should understand me," they suddenly felt that it was funny and sad. Yes, as a man, being responsible is a good thing. It's also a virtue. But do you know how many people you've hurt? Who have you hurt? Do you know that you're speaking so confidently right now? She's a woman, and she's a woman who's given everything to you but can't ask for anything in return. An infatuated woman? Even until the day you die, you might not know that there was such a woman in this world, in your life. For you, he destroyed his cultivation, lost his virginity, lost his future in martial arts, and almost lost everything. But you only treated him as a brother and a friend. How cruel was that? Yet, how helpless was that? Let time annihilate everything. Tai Butian repeated this in a low voice, but she was sighing in her heart. Time can annihilate everything. This saying is true. However, there was one thing that no amount of time could erase, and that was a woman's first time falling in love, her first time falling in love. Moreover, it was a sacrifice without any complaints or regret. Whether it was Wu Chen Chen or himself, even when Hua Banban was about to die 100 years later, they would not forget what happened during this period of time. Naturally, he wouldn't forget about a certain talented person who had appeared out of nowhere like a shooting star and changed the situation of the world. They were in love, but they were destined to never be together. The autumn wind sets the sun, and the sky is about to faint. After the vicissitudes of life, I'm alone in my thoughts. I sigh that heroes have failed me, and my daughter's heart is full of twists and turns. Tai Butian looked at the setting sun and the impending darkness on the earth. She couldn't help but sigh softly and emotionally. Then, she couldn't help but sigh softly again. She was extremely disappointed. Chu Yang thought that she was talking about Wu Chen Chen and was speechless for a moment. Then, they fell silent. Only the two figures sighed as they drove the carriage. Their sighs were filled with sorrow and helplessness. They lamented her misfortune and were angry at her failure to fight. The two of them could be said to have watched this girl grow up since she was a child, and both of them were extremely heartbroken. Oh heavens, please open your eyes. Even if you just give this poor girl a little bit of happiness, a little bit of comfort, that's fine too. I don't ask for much, just a little bit of comfort. Can't I get it? In her life, she seemed to be in a high position and had a noble background. But in reality, she had never received any happiness. Not even a truly happy smile. Not even once. Tai Butian curled up in the carriage. As they got down the carriage in silence, she felt more and more unbearable pain. The pain in her lower abdomen was so painful that she clenched her teeth and trembled. But she couldn't make a single sound. Beads of sweat the size of soybeans dripped from her forehead. The shadow who was driving the carriage sighed and said, "Minister Chu, I can't say that your injuries were fatal. But they were extremely difficult to heal. But you've recovered to this extent in such a short time after you woke up. So, you must have some miraculous medicine on you, right?" He didn't want to ask Chu Yang, but the elixirs on them weren't very useful for Tai Butian. Seeing Tai Butian in so much pain, he really couldn't bear it. With Chu Yang's recovery rate, he should have some miraculous elixirs. Yes, there are some miraculous elixirs. Although there aren't many, the effects are just passable. Chu Yang didn't know the meaning behind his question, but he still answered patiently. His Majesty was seriously injured in order to save you this time. And our elixirs are all used up. Shadow was silent for a while before he said. When he heard this, Chu Yang immediately recalled Tai Butian's unnatural posture and deathly pale complexion. He thought about how this iron-cloud monarch had almost given up the entire country's advance rescue for him. How could he not be moved? He asked, what kind of injuries did His Majesty suffer? Internal injuries. Shadow said. Internal injuries are easier to treat. Chu Yang nodded. At this time, other than heavy elixirs, he really didn't have any other medicine. After thinking for a while, he took out an incomplete version of heavy elixir and said, "Your Majesty, why don't you try my medicine?" "Okay." Tai Butian was in so much pain that she couldn't do anything about it. She agreed in a low voice and took the medicine. She swallowed it almost without looking at it clearly. Heavy elixirs were the most miraculous medicines in the world. How could their effects be compared to ordinary medicines? Although it was an incomplete version of heavy elixir, in this world, other than the complete version of heavy elixir, its medicinal effects were definitely the best in the world. After Tai Butian swallowed it, she only felt that the elixir melted in her mouth. A cool line slid down her throat and into her stomach. Then, an icy cold line went through her meridians for a round. Then, with a boom, it heated up. A copious amount of medicinal effects healed her body almost instantly. The bleeding in her lower body had stopped and the pain was gone. Moreover, her wounds were also healing. Even her spirit suddenly became much more uplifted. The remaining medicinal effects slowly melted into her meridians and actually nourished her body bit by bit. So many years of exhausting exhaustion actually seemed to be completely healed by this elixir. In fact, it was even better. The state of her body and spirit suddenly climbed to the peak at this moment and then maintained it. What kind of medicine is this? It's so miraculous. Tai Butian was shocked. She couldn't believe the effects of this miraculous medicine, as if she was dreaming. Then, she sat up and tidied up her body. She felt that her whole body was very relaxed. She couldn't help but be surprised and happy. This was given to me by a strange person. I don't know his name either, Chu Yang said softly. He thought for a while. Tai Butian's body didn't seem to be in good condition. Moreover, it was chaos now. Almost all of Diwu Qingrou's Golden Horse Riders department had gone to the front line. There were many experts. Tai Butian was the main target. There would be assassins almost any time and anywhere. It was really impossible to guard against. If something happened and he wasn't around, that would be terrible. So, he took out a piece of purple crystal from the tribulation space and used the tribulation sword to make a jade bottle. After hesitating for a while, he finally took out a complete version of heavy elixir and put it in the jade bottle. There were a total of 3 complete versions of heavy elixir. He gave one to Tai Butian and there were 2 more left. It was enough. Chu Yang thought to himself, when your father was around, I didn't have one. Even if I had 2, I couldn't take it out. Now, I'll compensate you. Then, he raised his voice and said, Your Majesty, I have a gift for you. I'm going over now. Without waiting for Tai Butian's reply, he jumped out of his carriage and climbed into Tai Butian's carriage. The 2 shadows didn't have any intention of stopping him this time. They let Chu Yang go up. The 2 of them knew very well that no matter what Chu Yang's gift was, It was probably the only thing that could make Tai Butian happy for a long time. This gift was very important, although Chu Yang himself didn't know. Tai Butian was obviously surprised. She looked at him with her eyes wide open. She said stutteringly, What gift? The moment Chu Yang boarded the carriage, he smelled a strange fragrance. It smelled like orchids and fans. He laughed in his heart. This young king is really young. To think that in this kind of environment, he would still bring perfume. It's this. Chu Yang turned his wrist and a purple crystal bottle the size of a finger appeared in his palm. A soybean-sized elixir lay quietly in the bottle. Even if one looked through the purple crystal bottle, it was shrouded in a mysterious mist. It shone like starlight, as if there was a universe in this purple crystal bottle. What is this? Tai Butian was a little restrained. Then, she calmed herself down and asked. Chu Yang lowered his voice and said seriously, This is a magical elixir. No matter what the situation is in the future, it can save your life. If you're injured, as long as your body isn't separated on the spot, as long as you still have a breath, this elixir can make you recover in an instant. Ah! Tai Butian's mouth opened wide. Even if you don't have a breath, as long as your body is warm, this elixir can make you live. Even if your life is at its end, this elixir can extend your life by at least 30 years. Chapter 374. Tai Butian looked at the elixirs made by Gari Sanshan and was suddenly enveloped by boundless happiness. In that instant of excitement, his face actually turned a little red. If it wasn't for the support of the miraculous art of disguise, he would have been dead already. At this moment, he would probably be blushing like a little girl. He was satisfied. He was really satisfied. Although this elixir might not be as miraculous as Chu Yang said, although Chu Yang didn't know what he had done for him, everything was worth it. Because the most important thing was this thought. No, I can't accept it. Tai Butian's eyes were a little red. After thinking for a while, he still rejected it. He looked up at Chu Yang seriously. Minister Chu, in the lower three heavens, you can live a life of luxury. There may not be any difficulties in your life. But you, if you go to the lower three heavens, every step will be dangerous. The martial world is dangerous and dangerous. Cai Xiao needs this the most. Tai Butian looked at Chu Yang steadily. You keep it. It's more useful than me. Chu Yang's heart warmed. He blinked and said, I still have. Tai Butian stared at him for a while. Seeing the serious look in his eyes, she knew that he wasn't lying. She finally smiled and gently took the purple crystal bottle from Chu Yang's palm. She slowly clenched her fist and put it down. Smiling, she said, Since that's the case, I'll accept it. Yes, it's only right. Chu Yang smiled warmly. He didn't notice that Tai Butian's body was trembling slightly. It was as if the most tender part of her heart was gently touched and trembling. Her expression was calm, but one of her hands had never let go of the purple crystal bottle since she took it. She used so much force that her knuckles turned white. Chu Yang smiled and said, Then I'll go over. Okay. Tai Butian maintained her composure with difficulty. Chu Yang smiled and stood up. He opened the curtain and jumped out. Tai Butian sat quietly with her head lowered. A happy smile appeared at the corners of her mouth. Actually, it's not like I can't get anything. After a long time, she held the purple crystal bottle in front of her eyes and looked at it carefully. Her eyes were full of tenderness. It was as if she could never get enough of this purple crystal bottle. Then, she held the bottle tightly against her chest, letting the purple crystal bottle feel her body temperature. She didn't move for a long time. Chu Yang had carved this purple crystal bottle into a work of art. It was extremely beautiful. However, what Tai Butian valued was not this kind of beauty. After a long time, Tai Butian put down the purple crystal bottle. Then, he put his hands behind his neck and untied a small object. It was a strange jade tablet. Then, Tai Butian picked up a small mirror. As soon as this jade tablet left her body, a dense radiance flashed. Tai Butian, who was originally a handsome young man full of heroic spirit, suddenly turned into a beautiful woman. As it turned out, her disguise was not a disguise. but the jade rocks effect. He just didn't know what it was. Tai Butian quietly looked at the devastatingly beautiful face in the mirror for a while. Then, she let out a bitter laugh and said in a low voice, "In this lifetime, this face. I'm afraid no one will be able to see it, right?" Then, she wrapped the purple crystal bottle with a tough silk thread and tied a dead knot. She hung it around her neck. Then, she untied her underwear and let this purple crystal bottle quietly stick to her most private part, sticking close to her delicate skin. "Stay with me. Stay with me for the rest of my life. It will be very, very good." Tai Butian looked at herself in the mirror, at the faintly discernible purple spot on her chest, and said softly. A teardrop fell gently. Tai Butian's hand trembled a little. However, she still put the small jade tablet back on slowly and resolutely. The radiance changed. That short-lived beauty disappeared without a trace. What replaced it was an emperor with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He looked down on the world and held the world in his hand. Tai Butian. The transmogrification effect of this jade tablet actually changed Tai Butian's temperament, skin color, appearance, and so on. Ever since she received that heavy pill, Tai Butian seemed to have untied the knot in her heart. Or rather, she had tied a dead knot in her heart. From then on, the events of this day and night would remain in her memory. I am Tai Butian, the Emperor of Iron Cloud Nation, the Emperor of a generation. I will ascend the 4 seas and rule the world. The last ray of light fell from the horizon. The boundless darkness suddenly swept over and descended upon the earth. Since Tai Butian and Chu Yang's injuries had already healed, they were worried about the battle. The 4 of them naturally had to speed up their journey. They simply abandoned the carriage and moved lightly. Taking advantage of the darkness, they rushed forward for a while. The 4 of them used their lightness techniques and carried Tai Butian along. Chu Yang rushed out with a swoosh sound. His body movement was agile and confident. He leapt out like a wisp of green smoke, and covered a distance of 70 feet. Moreover, his body swayed slightly in the air without borrowing any force. Then, he gently extended his hand, and swept across the ground with a swoosh sound. And, a fat hair appeared in his hand. Then, his eyes flashed as if he had discovered something. He didn't land on the ground. Instead, he strangely turned around and caught 2 pheasants in the weeds behind the rocks by the roadside. Then, he gently landed on the ground. The 2 shadows opened their eyes wide as if they had seen a ghost. They looked at Chu Yang. Their eyes were full of disbelief. What's wrong? Chu Yang carried the hare and the 2 pheasants. He smiled and said, I'm afraid these aren't enough for our meal. Fortunately, I have some dry food here. The 2 shadows didn't care about whether they had enough to eat or not. They only opened their eyes wide and asked, You're a king-level expert now? When these words came out, even Tai Butian opened her eyes wide and looked at Chu Yang. King-level expert? Qingxian was 17 years old when she met Chu Yang and Lu Dan. She had repeated her grade. Chu Yang has already become a king-level expert in just 1 year's time? This is too fake. I'm ashamed. I'm only a first-grade king-level expert, Chu Yang said modestly. The 2 shadows looked at each other. They were speechless. Martial warrior level, martial artist level, martial teacher level, martial great master level, martial honored sect. King-level expert. This bastard had crossed more than 40 levels in 1 year. And he still shyly said I'm ashamed. I'm only a first-grade king-level expert. Only? Ashamed your ass. Only your ass. You can't hit us like this. The 2 shadows were somewhat sad. The king level was their real cultivation. But, they also knew that this was the highest level of cultivation in their lives. They were already 10 years old. So, they wouldn't be able to make any progress in their lives. Now, Chu Yang had reached king-level expert at the age of 18. Then, how big would his future development be? County level? Definitely more than that. Then, saint level? It was very possible. Thinking of this, the 2 shadows looked at Chu Yang in front of them. They suddenly felt that they were looking up at a tall mountain. You're a king-level expert? Tai Butian looked at Chu Yang. There was a trace of pride in her eyes. Yes. Chu Yang laughed. Actually, it's not a big deal. If you didn't have so many things to do, with your aptitude, you wouldn't be. I'm bad. Tai Butian laughed and said, not necessarily. One of the shadows asked, then, what kind of king are you? This question came out of nowhere. But Chu Yang understood the meaning of this sentence. He smiled and said, I'm a sword king. King Ku. The two shadows were shocked once again. He wasn't an ordinary king-level expert. He was a sword king, one of the hardest king-level experts to reach. Since the Tribulation Swordmaster appeared in this heavenly layer, the sword had become a sacred weapon in this heavenly layer. This also led to the fact that the majority of moonsword martial artists in the world were martial artists. There were no clear rules for other martial arts. Only the sword. When one broke through the king-level expert and reached the emperor level, he would be a sword emperor, and not a sword emperor. This was the rule of the Tribulation Swordmaster. No one had dared to disobey it for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, Sword Emperor had become the supreme honor of a sword cultivator. It could be said that a first-grade Sword Emperor could easily kill a Saber Emperor of the same grade. The might of a sword cultivator could be imagined. A Sword King at such a young age. The two shadows looked at each other. They were speechless. That was because they had understood the meaning of each other's eyes. How many Sword Kings are there in the big clans of the upper three heavens at such a young age? Such a person has appeared in the lower three heavens instead of the upper three heavens. What does this mean? How much would it cost to nurture such a person in the big clans of the upper three heavens? They can't even think about it. That massive amount of elixirs and heavenly treasures is enough to bankrupt an ordinary small clan. Or, is this a good thing? The two shadows had this thought in their hearts. I don't know how the heaven-splitting mountain pass is. Tai Butian was standing on a big rock. She was looking into the distance. Her expression was faint. But, one could see that she was anxious. There shouldn't be any problem, Chu Kuang comforted her. Chu Yang comforted him. Wu Kuangyun is good at fighting. Moreover, he seems to be straightforward. But, he's brave and resourceful. He makes quick decisions. He's willing to give up when he has to. And, he has a good grasp of gains and losses. He's willing to risk hundreds of kilometers to go back. Moreover, the heaven-splitting mountain pass is a natural stronghold. He knew what Tai Butian was worried about. And, his words had dispelled Tai Butian's worries. Yes, there isn't enough time to withdraw all 500,000 people into the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Wu Kuangyun must make sacrifices to ensure the safety of the majority of his troops. And, he must ensure that the mountain pass doesn't fall into his hand. The key point is how to give up. However, the two of them hadn't expected that the attack and defense of the heaven-splitting mountain pass would be so fierce and earth-shattering. Diwu Qingru's calculations were extremely accurate. He had calculated every detail from thousands of kilometers away. He could have defeated Tai Butian's troops in one fell swoop if he had followed his plan. But, he hadn't calculated one thing. And, he hadn't calculated this one thing. And, it had led to a change in the course of the war. Ripples have been erupting for a few days now. But, I can't erupt today. It took me more than 10 hours to write 1,000 words. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.